I came home from a 4-day manhunt to find my front door wide open, and my living room looking like a tornado had developed a personal grudge against my furniture. Standing in the wreckage was the HOA president and her squad of security patrol officers, smiling like she had just won the lottery. She told me my locked filing cabinet was suspicious, so she used a crowbar to pry it open, live streaming the entire raid to the neighborhood right after her officers assaulted my wife. She thought she was simply bullying a neighbor about his pickup truck. But she had no idea she had just broken into the home of an FBI special agent and compromised active federal witness protection files. I was not just going to arrest her on the spot. I was about to turn her own public meeting into a massive federal sting operation and teach her exactly what happens when pretend cops pick a fight with real ones. I knew something was wrong the moment I turned onto my street. 3 cars in my driveway, none of them mine. And my front door was wide open at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I had spent 4 days tracking a cybercriminal across state lines, cheap motels, gas station coffee, sleeping in my truck because the suspect we were hunting operated at odd hours, no calls home. That was how it went when someone really did not want to be found. Now I was back, exhausted, unshowered, ready for nothing except a hot meal in my own bed, and someone had been in my house. I parked at the curb instead of the driveway, got out slow. My hand went to my hip out of habit before I remembered. I was not carrying. I had locked my service weapon in the truck safe for the drive home. This was supposed to be the easy part, the safe part. Home. I walked up my own driveway like I was approaching a crime scene. Turns out I was. My body still hummed from the highway. I was in decompress mode, trying to convince my nerves nobody was shooting at me. Usually the biggest threat in suburban Colorado was a rogue sprinkler or a package thief, but the air on the porch felt wrong, static, the kind of silence that screams. The living room was a tactical nightmare. My couch was flipped upside down, the fabric slashed, the coffee table lay splintered on its side, books everywhere, pulled from shelves and thrown, not just knocked over. Someone had gone through this room with intention. And there, in the middle of the wreckage, stood 5 people who had absolutely no business being in my house. Diane Winters, HOA president, 52 years old, bleached blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, red blazer, designer jeans, expensive watch, standing with her hands on her hips like she owned the place, like she had just conquered enemy territory and was surveying her victory. Behind her, arranged like some kind of pathetic honor guard, stood 4 men in matching navy blue polo shirts and baseball caps. The caps said HOA Security Patrol in bright yellow letters. I knew their names. Todd Ellis, tall, former military wannabe, the kind of guy who peaked in high school and never got over it. Kevin Park, shorter, tech guy energy, always looking for someone to tell him what to do. Gary Stone, older, military bearing, clearly just happy to be included in something. Jeff Miller, young, dumb, the follower who had not yet learned to question. 6 months ago, they were just neighbors, guys I would wave to when I was getting the mail. Now they were standing in my destroyed living room wearing matching costumes and plastic badges, looking like the world's saddest security team. Diane saw me in the doorway. Her face lit up. Actually lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. Mr. Chen, perfect timing. She spread her arms wide, gesturing at the chaos around her like she was showing off a renovation. We have just completed our compliance inspection. I did not say anything, just stood there taking it in. I am afraid we found several serious violations. She continued, clearly enjoying herself. That locked cabinet in your office? Very suspicious. We had to force it open to verify the contents. My filing cabinet, the heavy steel one with the reinforced lock, the one where I kept my case files. I looked past Diane through the doorway to my home office, papers scattered across the floor like confetti, the cabinet lying on its side, lock pried off, drawers pulled out. Those papers were federal documents, active case files, witness statements, surveillance notes, safe house addresses, information that people had trusted me to protect, information that could get people killed if it ended up in the wrong hands. Where is my wife? My voice came out flat, calm, the voice I use when questioning suspects who do not know they are suspects yet. Diane's smile flickered just for a half second. She was being uncooperative during the inspection. Todd had to restrain her. She said it casually, like it was nothing, like my wife was just an obstacle that had been dealt with. She is in the kitchen cooling off. I walked past Diane without another word. She actually looked offended, like she had rehearsed this whole victory speech and I was ruining it by not engaging. The kitchen was a mess too. Drawers pulled open, cabinet doors hanging, but I barely noticed. Lauren was sitting at the table. Her blue blouse was torn at the shoulder, the fabric ripped where someone had grabbed her. There was a bruise forming on her forearm, 4 distinct finger marks and a thumb, clear as a photograph. She had been grabbed hard, grabbed and held. She looked up at me when I walked in. Her eyes were dry, but they were burning. Cold fire. I tried to stop them, she said quietly. I told them they could not come in without a warrant. I said I was calling 911. I knelt beside her, fingers on her wrist. Her pulse was racing. Did they hit you? They smashed my phone, Marcus. Todd stomped on it like it was a cockroach. That is why I could not call you. She paused. Whatever the official term is for twisting a woman's arm behind her back until she screams, they did that. Her voice was trembling, not with fear, with rage that matched my own. Marcus, they went through your underwear drawer. They laughed about your socks, then they went for the files. I told them. I screamed at them that those were government property. Diane just laughed and said the HOA supersedes the government on aesthetic matters. She actually said that. I felt a cold click in my brain, the safety coming off. Behind me, I heard Diane's heels clicking on the hardwood. She had followed me. Mr. Chen, we really need to discuss the violations we found. There is the matter of your truck, which still has not been relocated to the garage despite multiple notices. The solar panel situation, which remains non-compliant. And now this suspicious locked cabinet full of what appear to be confidential documents of some kind. Diane. Something in my voice made her stop mid-sentence. I turned around slowly, looked at her, really looked at her. 4 days without sleep, 6 months of her harassment. And now this. Do you know what I do for a living? She blinked, thrown off by the question. You work for the government. Some kind of desk job, I assumed. Pushing papers. Not exactly. I pulled out my phone, dialed the number I knew by heart. This is FBI Special Agent Marcus Chen. Badge number 7741. I need to report a home invasion at my residence. Multiple suspects still on scene. Federal evidence has been compromised and potentially exposed. I need units here immediately. The silence that followed was beautiful. Diane's face went through about 6 different expressions in the span of 2 seconds. Confusion, processing, denial, the beginning of understanding, fear. Deputy, she stammered. What? FBI. Special agent. Federal law enforcement. I hunt cyber criminals for a living. The kind of people who think they can hide behind encrypted networks and international borders. That cabinet you broke open? Those were active case files. Witness protection information. Locations of people who are hiding from very dangerous criminals. The kind of information that gets people killed if it ends up in the wrong hands. Todd Ellis made a sound like a balloon deflating. Kevin Park had gone the color of old milk. But the bylaws. Todd stammered, his hand drifting toward the plastic baton on his belt. Article 4, Section 2. We have the right to secure non-compliant properties. I took 1 step toward him. Just 1. I did not raise my voice. I did not puff out my chest. I just let him see the difference between a man who plays dress-up and a man who hunts predators. Todd, look at me. Do you see a badge bought on Amazon? Or do you see the guy who put 3 ransomware crews in federal prison last year? Take your hand off that toy or I will feed it to you. Chapter and verse. Todd's hand snatched back like he had touched a hot stove. You just committed about 5 federal crimes, Diane. Minimum. On camera. Live streamed to 350 witnesses who probably saved the video. I tucked my phone away. I would say it was nice knowing you, but honestly, it really was not. 18 minutes later, my living room was full of actual law enforcement. Deputy Maria Gonzalez from the County Sheriff Department. A woman I had worked with on a few cases. Solid cop. No-nonsense type. 2 state troopers who had been in the area. And my supervisor, Agent Sarah Kim, who looked like someone who had been pulled out of a peaceful afternoon to deal with the dumbest crisis of her 20-year career. Diane was still trying to explain that the HOA had authority to conduct inspections. Nobody was listening. 6 months earlier, moving day, The first time I saw Diane Winters in action, she was screaming at an old woman about a garden gnome. Lauren and I had just pulled up to our new house with the moving truck. We were tired, sweaty, hungry, 3 days of packing, 1 long day of driving, and now an afternoon of unloading boxes ahead of us. All I wanted was to get through it and collapse. Then I heard the yelling. 2 houses down, a woman in her 70s was standing in her own front yard, clutching a ceramic garden gnome against her chest like it was a life preserver. And standing over her, finger jabbing the air, voice carrying clear across the entire street, was Diane Winters. The bylaws are very specific, Margaret. All decorative items must be approved by the Architectural Review Board. That gnome has been there for 3 weeks without proper authorization. It was a gift from my late husband. The old woman's voice was small. I do not care if it was a gift from the Pope himself. You have 24 hours to remove it from the premises, or I am issuing a formal violation with daily compounding fines. But Harold gave it to me the year before he— 24 hours, Margaret! Diane turned on her heel and stormed back toward her silver minivan, the one with the proud HOA president bumper sticker. The old woman, Margaret, stood in her yard hugging her gnome, looking like she might cry. I looked at Lauren. Lauren looked at me. So, she said, this is the neighborhood. Seems charming. That woman seems lovely. Very welcoming energy. We watched Diane's minivan peel away, probably off to terrorize someone else about their mailbox height or their incorrect shade of beige. $20 says she comes over here within an hour, I said. No bet. That is a sucker's game. 43 minutes later, Diane was marching up our driveway. I was unloading boxes from the truck, sweaty, annoyed, in absolutely no mood for whatever this was going to be. Good morning, you must be the new neighbors. I sat down a box of kitchen stuff. Marcus Chen, Diane Winters. She thrust out her hand and shook mine with the grip strength of someone who had read a business book about the importance of firm handshakes. I am the president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. Welcome to our little community. Thanks. Her eyes were already scanning, evaluating the moving truck, the boxes, my Ford F-150 parked at the curb, a 2018. Nothing fancy but reliable. She looked at that truck like I had parked a dead whale in front of my house. I brought you a welcome packet. She handed me a folder thick enough to stop bullets. Rules, regulations, fee schedules, approved exterior paint colors, lawn maintenance standards, driveway specifications, vehicle guidelines. Vehicle guidelines. Her smile tightened just slightly. We have very specific standards in Meadowbrook Estates. All vehicles must be in good repair and appropriately clean. No commercial vehicles. No boats or recreational vehicles without prior written approval. Nothing that detracts from the overall neighborhood aesthetic. She was looking at my truck when she said aesthetic, like it personally offended her. That is my personal vehicle, I said. Had it for 4 years, never had a complaint anywhere I have lived. I am sure it is functional. The way she said functional made it sound like a disease. But Meadowbrook Estates is a premium community, Mr. Chen. We have worked very hard to maintain certain standards. Property values depend on aesthetic consistency. I could feel Lauren watching from the porch, probably calculating the odds of getting away with accidentally dropping a box on Diane's head. I will look over the packet. Wonderful. I am sure we will get along beautifully. Most new residents find that once they understand our standards, everything goes very smoothly. She beamed at me. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator sizing up new prey. Welcome to Meadowbrook Estates, Mr. Chen. She drove away. I stood there holding a folder that weighed about 3 pounds, wondering what exactly we had gotten ourselves into. I do not like her, Lauren said from the porch. Nobody likes her, that is her whole personality. The first violation notice arrived 4 days later. Bright yellow paper. Notice of violation printed across the top in big, angry capital letters. The crime: unapproved vehicle in residential driveway. The fine: $100. 7 days to achieve compliance or face escalating daily penalties. I read it 3 times, certain I was missing something. I went back through the welcome packet. Every single page. The vehicle section said nothing about pickup trucks being prohibited. Nothing about specific makes or models. Nothing about aesthetic standards for personal vehicles. I called the number on the notice. Diane answered on the second ring, voice bright and cheerful. Your notice says my truck is unapproved. I have been through the bylaws 3 times. There is nothing in there prohibiting pickup trucks. It is not about the specific type of vehicle, Mr. Chen. It is about community standards. Your truck is utilitarian. It is a truck. Trucks are utilitarian. That is what they are. Exactly my point. I waited for her to realize that was not actually an argument. She did not. The board has reviewed your vehicle and determined it does not meet our aesthetic requirements. You are welcome to garage it. Or, of course, you could find alternative transportation more appropriate for a community like Meadowbrook Estates. My garage is full of moving boxes and my wife's car. Then I would suggest looking into a storage unit. There is an excellent facility about 15 minutes away. Very reasonable rates. I took a deep breath, counted to 5, reminded myself that I was a trained federal officer who had kept his cool while tracking down international hackers who were actively trying to cover their tracks. I could handle a middle-aged woman with a clipboard and a god complex. Diane, I am not getting rid of my truck. I am not hiding it. It is a legal vehicle parked on my own property, and there is nothing in your bylaws that specifically prohibits it. Silence on the line. When she spoke again, the cheerful mask had cracked just slightly. Underneath was something colder. Rules are rules, Mr. Chen. If you refuse to comply voluntarily, there will be consequences. Have a wonderful day. She hung up. I stared at my phone. I had faced down armed cybercriminals with less hostility than this woman had just shown me over a Ford F-150. This was going to be a long 6 months. The second violation arrived 48 hours later. This time it was my solar panels. According to Diane's notice, the panels on my roof created glare and were an unapproved aesthetic modification. Colorado has a solar rights law, specifically prohibits HOAs from banning solar installations. I knew this because I had researched it before buying the house. I emailed Diane copies of the state statute, politely worded explanation of why her violation was invalid. The response arrived the next morning. The HOA's Architectural Review Board has determined that while solar panels may be legally protected under state law, the specific placement and visible profile of your installation violates our aesthetic standards. Please remedy within 7 days, or face a $250 fine with daily escalation. I showed Lauren the email. This is insane, she said. Yup. She's just making up rules. Yup. What are we going to do? I thought about it. I could fight this. I could hire a lawyer, demand hearings, challenge every bogus fine. I could make this my whole life for the next year. But I had an actual job. A job that involved tracking down dangerous criminals and putting them in prison where they belonged. I was not going to let Diane Winters live rent-free in my head while hackers and fraudsters walked free. We are going to ignore her. Just ignore her? She wants a reaction. She wants me to fight back so she can escalate, so she can make herself the victim of the angry, unreasonable neighbor. So I will not give her that. I will document everything, follow the actual rules, and let her exhaust herself sending violations that will not hold up anywhere. Over the next 2 months, the violations became a running joke. Trash can visible from street on the wrong day. It was collection day. I had the city schedule printed and dated. Lawn height over 3.5 inches. Measured at 3.2. Unapproved exterior decoration. Our welcome mat with a golden retriever on it. Then came holiday lights too early and a tiny oil spot in the driveway. Each notice came with a fine and a threat. I documented everything. Photographs, timestamps, written records. But I never responded, never called, never engaged. It drove Diane absolutely insane. I could see it when we passed each other in the neighborhood. The tight, forced smile. The eye that twitched when I waved. The way her hands would clench at her sides when I refused to acknowledge her power. Good morning, Mr. Chen. I notice your grass is getting a little long again. Big friendly wave. Thanks for keeping an eye out, Diane. Appreciate you. That truck of yours is very loud in the mornings. Some of us are trying to sleep. Even bigger wave. I will keep that in mind. Have a great day. The board is watching your property very closely. Biggest wave yet. Great. Hope they are enjoying the show. She wanted anger. She wanted confrontation. She wanted me to give her something she could use. I gave her nothing but aggressive cheerfulness. It was the most petty, passive-aggressive thing I had ever done. I loved every second of it. Lauren was less patient with the long game. I could back into her mailbox, she offered one evening, very slowly, while making direct eye contact. That is destruction of property, not if it is an accident. You would have to back up about 300 feet and make a deliberate turn to hit her mailbox. I can make it look convincing. Lauren, I'm just exploring options. The first time I saw the uniforms, I genuinely thought it was some kind of prank. I was coming home late from work, around 9 p.m., exhausted from a long day of digital forensics and case reports, when I noticed something unusual at the corner of Maple and Oak. A man standing under the streetlight, navy blue polo shirt, matching baseball cap, some kind of badge clipped to his belt, clipboard in hand, flashlight in the other, watching the street like he was expecting trouble. I slowed down as I passed, squinted at his hat. HOA Security Patrol in bright yellow letters. I actually laughed out loud, alone in my truck, cackling like a lunatic at a stop sign. The HOA Security Patrol had been announced in a newsletter I barely skimmed. Diane called it a volunteer safety patrol to ensure compliance and security. She used the words police authority and compliance way more than anything about safety. There was a group photo at the bottom, Diane in the center, beaming like a proud mother on the first day of school. Around her stood 4 men in matching uniforms: Todd Ellis, Kevin Park, Gary Stone, Jeff Miller. They looked like a paramilitary unit ordered from a discount catalog. Tactical belts with nothing on them, combat boots that had never seen mud. It was cosplay with a god complex. The patrols quickly became a nightly occurrence. Between 8 p.m. and midnight, the security patrol walked the streets of Meadowbrook with flashlights and clipboards, documenting violations, photographing driveways, measuring lawns with actual tape measures. And they communicated by walkie-talkie. The walkie-talkies almost broke me. I was taking out my trash one night when I heard it. Unit 2 to base, I have got a possible violation on Elm. Base, go ahead. Garden gnome, unapproved, Class 3 aesthetic threat. I looked over. Todd Ellis was sitting in a lawn chair in Diane's driveway, walkie-talkie in hand, clipboard on his lap, coordinating his troops like he was running a military operation. I waved at him. He pretended not to see me. 3 weeks after the patrol started, I noticed the drone. I was on my back porch enjoying a beer after a particularly brutal day analyzing encrypted hard drives when I heard the buzzing. I looked up. 50 feet overhead, a drone was hovering, camera pointed directly at my backyard, just hanging there, watching. It came back the next night, and the next. Each night a little lower, a little bolder. I pointed it out to Lauren. "That is definitely illegal," she said. "They cannot spy on us like that." It is a gray area legally, but it is also incredibly annoying. I took a sip of my beer, considered my options. Get me that fishing net from the garage. The fishing net? Why? Trust me. The next evening, I set my trap. I sat on the porch, acting natural, beer in hand, fishing net propped against the railing where I could grab it quickly. Just a guy enjoying his backyard on a pleasant evening. Right on schedule, around 9 p.m., the drone appeared. It rose up from the east, Diane's direction, and drifted over to its usual position above my property. It hovered at about 30 feet. Camera pointed down. I gave it a friendly wave. Then I grabbed the net, walked out into the yard, and positioned myself directly underneath. Now I am 42 years old. Bad knee from a foot chase that went sideways 3 years ago. Not exactly in peak athletic condition. But I am also 6'2" with decent hops and a lot of motivation. First jump, miss. The net whooshed through empty air about 2 feet below the target. Second jump, miss, closer. But the drone operator was starting to get nervous. The thing wobbled, started to rise. Third jump, I caught a rotor. The drone wobbled, tilted, started to spin. I pulled hard. It came down like a very expensive, very stupid bird. The motor screamed in protest, a high-pitched electronic whine that sounded satisfyingly like panic. I did not just pull. I yanked, with the frustration of 6 months of surveillance. The plastic casing shattered on the patio pavers. The camera lens skittered across the concrete like a detached eyeball. I picked up the smoking wreckage. "Permission to land denied," I muttered. It hit the grass with a satisfying crunch. Rotors whirring uselessly. Camera pointed at the sky. I stood over my prize, breathing hard, net in hand. Gotcha. Todd Ellis was at my door within 20 minutes, red-faced and puffing from the sprint over. "You stole our drone." "Your drone crashed in my yard. I am simply holding it for safekeeping." "You pulled it down with a fishing net. I saw the whole thing." "Did you? Interesting. Were you watching my property without my consent? Because that sounds like the kind of thing a lawyer might be interested in." His face went from red to purple. Behind him, Diane's minivan was idling at the curb. I could see her in the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, watching everything. "That drone is HOA property. You are required to return it immediately. Actually, I am not. Your drone was conducting surveillance on my private property without consent. That is a violation of state privacy laws. I would be well within my rights to report this to actual police, the kind with real badges and actual legal authority. Todd's mouth opened and closed like a fish that had just learned a terrible truth about the nature of water. I picked up the drone and held it out to him. Here's how this is gonna go. You are gonna take this. You are going to tell Diane that if I ever see it over my property again, ever, I am filing charges, real charges, in a real court, with real consequences. He took the drone. His hands were shaking. You are going to regret this, he said. But there was no conviction in it, just reflex. I smiled at him, all teeth, no warmth. I really will not. The violation notice arrived 2 days later, interfering with official HOA safety operations. Fine, $200. I laughed until my stomach hurt. After the drone incident, Diane went quiet. No more violation notices, no more patrols past my house, no more passive-aggressive comments when we crossed paths at the mailbox. It should have been a relief. Instead, it made my instincts scream. She's planning something, I told Lauren. Maybe you finally scared her off. Diane Winters has never been scared of anything in her life except an unapproved paint color. She is waiting, watching, looking for an opening. The opening came exactly the way I knew it would, when I was out of town on a case. The call came in on a Monday. Ransomware attack, major hospital system, patient data encrypted, with lives literally at stake. We needed boots on the ground in Seattle immediately. I will be gone 3, maybe 4 days, I told Lauren. We will be fine. She kissed me. Go catch bad guys. I left Tuesday morning, flew to Seattle. Spent 3 days in a windowless room with 2 other agents, tracing blockchain transactions and analyzing malware code, tracking down the crew responsible. Cheap motel, gas station coffee. No time for anything except the case. Thursday afternoon, we got them. 5 arrests across 3 states. Hospital data recovered, lives saved, job done. I called Lauren from the airport. Got voicemail, tried again an hour later. Still voicemail. Phone going straight to voicemail, actually, like it was off or dead. Odd, but not alarming. Her phone died sometimes. She would charge it and call back. I boarded my flight home, 4 hours in the air, landed in Denver at midnight. Still no call back. Now I was worried. I drove home faster than I should have, turned onto my street at 2 in the morning, and saw the cars, 3 of them. In my driveway, none of them mine. My front door was wide open. And that was when I knew Diane had made her move. I parked at the curb, got out, walked up to my own house like I was entering a hostile situation. Because I was. Living room destroyed, office ransacked, filing cabinet forced open, Lauren in the kitchen with bruises and torn clothing, and Diane Winters standing in the middle of it all like a queen surveying her conquered territory. She had gone too far, way too far, and she had no idea what she had just unleashed. Because I was not just Marcus Chen, annoyed neighbor with a pickup truck. I was FBI Special Agent Marcus Chen. And I was about to teach Diane Winters exactly what happens when fake authority meets real law enforcement. The game was over. Her reign was ending. And I was going to make sure everyone watched. The morning sun broke over the Denver skyline like a promise. 6 in the morning, and Marcus Chen stood in front of his bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of his white dress shirt. The fabric felt crisp against his skin, freshly pressed, ready for battle. Behind him, reflected in the glass, Lauren moved through the room with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. Navy suit, the one she had not worn in 2 years, the one that still smelled faintly of courtroom air and victory. She caught his eye in the mirror. No words passed between them. None were needed. They had been married long enough to communicate in glances, in the subtle shift of shoulders, in the way she straightened his tie without being asked. Her fingers lingered on the knot for just a moment, a silent acknowledgement. Today, everything changed. Marcus's phone buzzed on the dresser. A text from Agent Sarah Kim. All units in position, standing by for your signal. He showed the screen to Lauren. She nodded once, sharp, decisive. The prosecutor nod. The one that said she had reviewed the evidence, found it sufficient, and was ready to proceed. Breakfast was quiet, toast and coffee. Neither of them could manage much more. Grace's toys were scattered across the living room floor, remnants of yesterday's innocence. In a few hours, that innocence would be preserved, protected, made permanent by what they were about to do. 2 miles away, in an abandoned office building parking lot, 10 FBI agents stood around the mobile command center. Tactical vests being adjusted, earpieces tested, weapons checked with the methodical calm of professionals who had done this 100 times before. But this operation was different. Everyone knew it. You could feel it in the air, thick with the weight of righteous purpose. Sarah Kim stood at the center of the controlled chaos, her eyes on a laptop screen showing a live feed of Meadowbrook's Community Center. Early morning light painted the building in shades of gold. By tonight, that building would be legend, the place where an empire fell. Inside Diane Winters' sprawling colonial home, the mood was celebratory. She stood in her walk-in closet, selecting her outfit with the care of a queen preparing for coronation. Red blazer, white silk blouse, pearl necklace her mother had given her, the one that caught the light just right. Tonight was her night, the night she would make it official. The Chen family broken, the security patrol recognized, her authority cemented forever. In her kitchen, Todd Ellis sat at the island counter, coffee growing cold in front of him. He had been awake since 4, unable to sleep, the weight of what he was about to do pressing on his chest like a physical thing. The wire was already taped to his skin, hidden beneath his black security patrol polo. Every breath he took reminded him it was there. Every heartbeat transmitted to FBI receivers 2 miles away. Diane swept into the kitchen, energy radiating from her like heat. She did not notice Todd's pallor, his trembling hands. She saw only what she wanted to see: loyalty, compliance, fear. "Tonight we celebrate, Todd." She poured herself coffee, her movements sharp and efficient. "The Chens are broken. They paid every fine. Marcus even apologized. Can you believe that? After all his defiance, he finally learned his place." Todd managed a nod. His throat felt lined with glass. What if they fight back? Diane laughed. The sound was bright and cruel. With what? "I control the HOA board. I have Judge Harrison. I have 350 residents watching my live streams." She leaned against the counter, her smile widening. "They have nothing. Absolutely nothing." The wire captured every word. 2 miles away, Sarah Kim listened through headphones, her jaw tight. She looked at the assembled agents. "We let her hang herself completely. No move until Lauren gives the signal." By 6 that evening, Meadowbrook's Community Center parking lot was filling up, cars arriving in steady succession, residents climbing out with covered dishes, resigned expressions, the look of people attending mandatory fun. Some nodded to each other. Others walked alone, heads down, trying to be invisible. 3 years of Diane's reign had taught them well. Do not stand out, do not attract attention, survive. Lauren arrived first, parking near the exit. Strategic positioning. She sat in the car for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The same breathing she had used before closing arguments, before verdicts, before moments that changed lives. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Navy suit perfect, hair pulled back. No jewelry except her wedding ring and the smartwatch on her left wrist. The watch that had recorded 87 minutes of hell. The watch that was about to replay every second. When she stepped out of the car, heads turned. Whispers rippled through the parking lot. "That's her. The woman from the video. The one who got raided." She held her head high and walked toward the entrance like she owned the building. Because tonight, in a way, she would. Inside, the community center had been transformed. Folding chairs arranged in neat rows, theater style. A stage at the front with a podium, 5 chairs behind it for the security patrol, potluck tables along the left wall, already laden with casseroles and desserts, and Diane's famous 7-layer dip that everyone pretended to like. A massive projection screen hung behind the stage, currently dark, waiting. Lauren took a seat in the front row, center, the power position, the place where every eye would see her, where Diane could not avoid her gaze. Patricia Morgan slid into the seat beside her, the elderly widow's hand finding Lauren's and squeezing once. No words, just solidarity. Marcus entered 10 minutes later, moving along the back wall, positioning himself near the exit. He scanned the room with FBI eyes, counting exits, noting positions, checking sightlines. When his eyes found Lauren's across the crowded space, something passed between them. An electric current, a shared understanding. This is it. On stage, Todd Ellis stood with Kevin Park, Gary Stone, and Jeff Miller. All four wore matching black polos, tactical belts, plastic badges gleaming under the fluorescent lights. They looked like children playing dress-up with their father's clothes. Except the damage they had done was real. The fear they had created was genuine. The families they had destroyed were not pretending. Kevin Park bounced on his heels, eager, oblivious. He thought tonight was about recognition, celebration. He had not yet learned that pride comes before destruction. Gary Stone stood at attention, military posture, chest out. He had served his country once, honorably. Tonight would mark the moment he learned that honor cannot be borrowed from the past. It must be earned every day. Jeff Miller, the youngest, shifted his weight from foot to foot, nervous energy he did not understand. Some animal part of his brain sensed danger, but his conscious mind dismissed it. They were the law here. They were protected. They were untouchable. Only Todd stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back, staring at nothing, waiting. 7 o'clock came like a sentence being pronounced. Diane Winters swept into the community center as if entering a throne room. Red blazer immaculate, pearls catching every light. Her heels clicked on the linoleum floor with the rhythm of a hammer striking nails into a coffin. She smiled at everyone and no one, her eyes distant with the glaze of absolute certainty. She took the stage, gavelled the meeting to order with 3 sharp raps that echoed like gunshots. Welcome, residents of Meadowbrook Estates, where excellence is not optional. It is mandatory. Polite applause, some genuine from her supporters, some fearful from her victims. Lauren did not clap. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching, waiting, a coiled spring. The first 40 minutes were standard HOA theater, budget reports, landscaping contract renewals, parking violation statistics. Diane droned on with the confidence of someone who believed her words mattered, that these details defined civilization itself. The audience shifted in uncomfortable chairs, checking phones, waiting for the real show. And then Diane's face changed. Her smile sharpened. Her eyes brightened with something dark and hungry. She connected her laptop to the projector. The screen behind her glowed to life. Now, she said, her voice dropping to something intimate and dangerous, I would like to invite our security patrol volunteers to the front for a special recognition ceremony. Todd, Kevin, Gary, and Jeff stood. They walked to their designated chairs with varying degrees of pride. Kevin practically strutted. Gary marched. Jeff shuffled. Todd moved like a man walking to the gallows. These 4 men, Diane continued, have dedicated countless hours to keeping our community safe and compliant. She let that word hang in the air. Compliant. They patrol our streets. They enforce our standards. They ensure that Meadowbrook Estates remains the premium community we all chose to call home. She paused. The pause of a conductor before the crescendo. I would like to especially recognize their recent work at the Chen property, where they conducted an emergency compliance inspection and uncovered serious violations that had been hidden from this community. Her eyes found Lauren's, a direct challenge, a thrown gauntlet. She smiled like a cat cornering a mouse. Let me show you some highlights. She clicked her laptop. The projection screen flickered, but the image that appeared was not from Diane's prepared presentation. It was a frozen frame from her own Facebook live stream. Todd Ellis standing in Marcus Chen's destroyed living room, giving a big thumbs up to the camera. Behind him, bookshelves overturned, papers scattered. A chess set Marcus's grandfather had given him, pieces broken on the floor like fallen soldiers. The room went dead silent. Diane's smile froze. Her hand moved to the laptop, fingers jabbing at keys. What? The word came out strangled. The slide changed. Kevin Park grinning, holding the crowbar he had used to pry open the filing cabinet, his face young and stupid and proud of destruction. Click. Another slide. The live stream comments scrolling across the screen. Laugh out loud, we are totally wrecking this guy's stuff. Diane is gonna love this. That will teach him to park that ugly truck in the driveway. Check the bedroom next. Diane was stabbing at her keyboard now, face draining of color. This is not. I did not. Someone hacked my. Click. A screenshot of an email. Diane's email. Subject line. Make an example of the Chens. Body text. I want them to regret the day they moved into this neighborhood. Click. Another email. The compliance warrant gives us full legal authority. If they resist, document everything for the lawsuit we are going to file. Click. The compliance warrant itself. Diane's signature at the bottom, dated 3 days before the raid. Premeditated, planned, criminal. Click. The image that silenced the room completely. Lauren's face during the raid, captured from the live stream. Todd's hand gripping her arm. Her expression twisted in pain and fear and helpless rage, a moment of violation frozen forever. The community center erupted, voices rising, chairs scraping, phones coming out to record, the buzz of shock spreading like fire through dry brush. Diane was at her laptop, slamming it shut, but the image remained on the screen. Lauren's tortured face looming over the room like an accusation that could not be silenced. Turn it off. Diane's voice cracked. Someone pull the plug. This is a fabrication, a deep fake. Someone hacked. She spun toward the screen, arms waving frantically, as if she could physically erase what everyone had seen. But you cannot unsee truth. You cannot unknown what you know. The back door of the community center swung open. The sound cut through the chaos like a knife. Every head turned. Deputy Maria Gonzalez walked in, her badge catching the light. Behind her came 4 county deputies, 2 state troopers, and then the FBI. Dark windbreakers with bright yellow letters. U.S. Marshal. Federal Agent. The words that meant the game had changed completely. They spread across the back of the room, blocking every exit. Professional. Silent. Overwhelming. The buzzing stopped. Total silence descended. The kind of silence that follows an explosion, when ears are still ringing and brains are still processing what just happened. Diane's mouth opened and closed. No sound emerged. Her hands gripped the podium, knuckles white, the only thing keeping her upright. Deputy Gonzalez walked up the center aisle. Her boots on linoleum marked time like a countdown to the end of everything. She stopped 10 feet from the stage, pulled a folded paper from her jacket with practiced precision, and her voice when she spoke had the flat authority of law itself. Diane Winters, I have a warrant for your arrest. You are being charged with criminal trespass, assault, destruction of property, obstruction of justice, and impersonating a law enforcement officer. Diane's face went through a dozen expressions in 3 seconds. Denial, anger, confusion, bargaining. More anger. Then something like system failure, when the mind cannot process what reality is presenting. That is ridiculous. The words came out too loud, shrill, desperate. I am the president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. I have authority here. I have jurisdiction. Ma'am, Gonzalez's voice never changed tone. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly recommend you use it. You cannot do this. Diane was shouting now, all pretense of control evaporating. This is my meeting, my community. I built this neighborhood into what it is today. You also have the right to an attorney, if you cannot afford one. I do not need an attorney. Diane's voice climbed higher. I need you to understand that the HOA has legal authority to enforce community standards. We have bylaws, we have procedures. Everything we did was completely justified. Deputy Gonzalez looked at her with the infinite patience of someone who had seen every variety of denial in her career. Ma'am, bylaws are not laws. An HOA is not a government. You cannot write yourself the power to break into people's homes and call it a warrant. It was a compliance inspection. It was a felony. Several felonies, actually. She nodded to 2 deputies. Take her. They moved toward the stage. Diane scrambled backward, knocking over her podium. The compliance warrant she had been so proud of fluttered to the floor like a bird with broken wings. I demand you call the sheriff. Her voice was breaking now, words tumbling out in panic. I demand you call the governor. I have the power to levy liens. I have the power to foreclose. Deputy Gonzalez stepped onto the stage, her presence filling the space that Diane had once commanded. She picked up the so-called warrant with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated evidence. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent, but you clearly lack the capacity. You are not a government. You are a hobbyist with a God complex. And you just tried to foreclose on the United States Marshal Service. She leaned in close so the whole room could hear. Bad move. That was when Todd Ellis made the decision that would define the rest of his life. He stepped forward, putting himself physically between Diane and the approaching deputies. His chest puffed out, his plastic badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His voice when he spoke held an edge of desperation. "Stop right there. We are the law enforcement of this community. You have no jurisdiction here." Someone in the audience laughed. They could not help it. The absurdity was too much. Deputy Gonzalez looked at Todd the way you might look at a child who just announced he was Superman. "Sir, step aside. The Meadowbrook Security Patrol has full authority over all matters of." "Sir." Her voice went flat and hard. "You are wearing a polo shirt and a plastic badge you ordered off the internet. You have no authority. You have no jurisdiction. You have no legal standing whatsoever. Now step aside before I add obstruction to your charges." Todd's face went from red to purple, his hands clenched into fists. And then, in a moment of staggering stupidity that would haunt him for years, he reached out and grabbed Deputy Gonzalez's arm. "I said you have no." He did not finish. Gonzalez moved like water flowing downhill, smooth, fast, inevitable. 1 second and Todd was posturing. The next he was face down on the community center floor, arm twisted up behind his back, Gonzalez's knee planted firmly on his spine. "Todd Ellis, you are under arrest for assault on a law enforcement officer. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney." Todd squealed. The sound was high and animal and pathetic. Kevin Park took an instinctive step forward, maybe to help, maybe just out of panic. A state trooper intercepted him before he got 2 feet. "Don't." Kevin's hands shot up so fast he nearly slapped himself in the face. Gary Stone and Jeff Miller stood frozen, watching their entire world collapse around them like a building in controlled demolition. Diane was screaming now. Not words, just noise, raw and incoherent and increasingly detached from reality. "This is illegal. This is harassment. The HOA is the real authority. You cannot do this to me. I know people. Important people. I will have all of your badges." Agent Sarah Kim walked up to her, moving slowly, badge held up where it caught the light and could not be ignored. "Ma'am, I am Supervisory Deputy U.S. Marshal Sarah Kim." Diane stopped screaming, blinked at the badge like she had never seen one before. "The home you broke into belongs to one of my officers. The files you scattered across his floor and broadcast on Facebook contain the identities and current locations of federally protected witnesses." All the color drained from Diane's face. Federal witnesses. 3 families in hiding from very dangerous people. Cartel members. Murderers. The kind of people who kill witnesses and everyone connected to them. Sarah let that sink in. Let it carve itself into Diane's brain. Their safe house addresses were in those files. The files you live streamed to 350 people. I did not know. "No, you did not, because you did not bother to find out. You just assumed you had the right to do whatever you wanted to, whoever you wanted." She stepped aside, clearing the path. Marcus Chen walked to the front of the room. Every eye in the place followed him, the whole neighborhood watching. He stopped directly in front of Diane, close enough to see the mascara running down her cheeks, close enough to watch the exact moment understanding finally arrived. He pulled out his badge, held it up so she could see it clearly. Deputy U.S. Marshal Marcus Chen. He let that hang in the air. Let it fill the space. Let it rewrite every interaction they had ever had. "You raided the wrong house, Diane. You picked a fight with someone who actually knows how the law works. And now you get to find out what happens when pretend cops meet real ones." The deputies took her arms. "No, get off me. I am the president. I have authority. This is not over." They led her toward the door, still screaming. As she passed through the crowd, all the neighbors she had bullied and fined and threatened for years, nobody moved to help her. Nobody said a word of support. The silence was more damning than any accusation. Patricia Morgan caught Marcus's eye from the 3rd row. She was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in years. They led Diane out in handcuffs. She screamed the whole way about her authority, about her lawyers, about the important people she knew who would make all of this go away. Nobody was listening. The building had already moved on. The tyrant was deposed. The kingdom was free. Todd had to be hauled to his feet, whimpering, arms still twisted, at an uncomfortable angle. They walked him to a cruiser with his head down, not meeting anyone's eyes. The tough guy act had lasted all of 15 seconds against a real officer. Kevin, Gary, and Jeff stood in a sad little cluster, hands up as more deputies moved in. We did not know. Kevin was pleading, tears streaming down his face. Diane said it was legal. She said the warrant was real. She said we had authority. You broke into a man's home? Deputy Gonzalez's voice held no sympathy. You assaulted his wife. You destroyed federal evidence. She told me to is not a legal defense. It did not work at Nuremberg, and it is not going to work in county court. But, Kevin's voice cracked, did you actually believe HOA police was a real thing? Silence. Did you think the matching polo shirts gave you legal authority to enter people's homes? Nothing. Did you think the walkie-talkies made you law enforcement? Jeff finally spoke, voice breaking. Diane said, Diane is being loaded into a squad car right now. What Diane said does not matter anymore. What you did matters. And what you did is multiple felonies. They cuffed them one by one. Kevin was openly sobbing now, big, wet, gasping sobs that shook his whole body. Gary looked like he might throw up on his plastic badge. Jeff just stared at nothing, completely shut down, the way people do when their brains cannot process the magnitude of their mistake. The room had transformed. People were talking, laughing, hugging. 3 years of Diane's reign, and they were watching it end in real time. Phones were out everywhere, recording the arrests, texting updates, calling people who had not made it to the meeting to tell them they had missed history. Patricia Morgan pushed through the crowd to find Marcus and Lauren. Mr. Chen, Mrs. Chen. She took Lauren's hand in both of hers. Thank you. Thank you so much. That folder you gave us made this possible. Lauren's voice was soft. I have more at home. Boxes of it. 3 years of documentation. 3 years of waiting for someone to finally do something. Patricia's eyes were wet, but she was smiling. My Harold would have loved this. He always said someone would eventually stand up to her. More victims came forward. Dr. James Wilson, the young Nakamura couple with their children. 8 families who had suffered under Diane's rule, who had been terrorized and extorted and humiliated, and who now finally saw justice. Lauren nodded and shook hands and accepted thanks, but there was something distant in her eyes. Marcus recognized it. The prosecutor distance, the wall you build between yourself and emotion when the work is not yet done. Outside, the circus continued. 5 people in handcuffs, 3 squad cars with lights flashing, a crowd gathering on the sidewalk, people who had heard the commotion, gotten the texts, wanted to see the show. In the age of social media, news traveled faster than light. Diane was still going even as they guided her into the back of a cruiser. I demand to speak to your supervisor. Ma'am, you have demanded that 11 times now. The officer's patience was impressive. The answer has not changed. I know the mayor. The mayor has no authority over federal charges. I know the governor. Neither does the governor. I will sue. I will sue everyone. The county, the state, the federal government. I will sue you personally. I will sue this entire department. The officer looked at her with something that might have been pity if you squinted. Ma'am, you are going to have plenty of time to work on your lawsuit. They have a very nice law library in federal prison. They closed the door. She was still screaming as the car pulled away, face pressed against the window like a fish in a tank. Marcus stood on the sidewalk and watched the lights disappear around the corner. Lauren appeared beside him, slipped her hand into his. How do you feel? He thought about it. Really thought about it. Ask me when the trials are over. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Fair enough. They stood there for a while, watching the crowd disperse, watching the quiet evening settle back over Meadowbrook Estates. Somewhere out there, Diane Winters was being processed into the county jail, probably demanding to speak to the booking officer's supervisor. And here, finally, after everything, the rest of them could breathe. 2 miles away, at the county courthouse, a different scene was unfolding. Judge Robert Harrison sat in his chambers, reviewing tomorrow's docket with the arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable. 62 years old, 20 years on the bench, a reputation built on being tough but fair, which was code for being firmly in the pocket of anyone with enough money. His phone rang, Diane's name on the caller ID. He almost did not answer. She had been calling constantly lately, paranoid about the Chen case, worried about exposure, but ignoring her would only make her more frantic. David, they are arresting me. Her voice was shrill with panic. You have to. The door to his chambers burst open. 3 U.S. Marshals in tactical gear, badges displayed, weapons holstered but visible. The lead marshal held up a folded document. "Judge Robert Harrison, I have a warrant for your arrest." Harrison's hand went slack. The phone clattered to his desk, Diane's voice still squawking from the speaker, tiny and distant. "This is outrageous." He stood, trying to summon judicial authority. "I am a district court judge. You cannot arrest me without." "Federal warrant supersedes your position." The marshal's voice was flat. "And we have evidence." "What evidence? What charges?" "Conspiracy, bribery, judicial corruption, obstruction of justice." The marshal opened the warrant, began reading. "You are accused of accepting campaign contributions in exchange for favorable rulings, of conspiring with Diane Winters to create false legal authority for HOA enforcement, of using your position to shield criminal activity." "This is absurd. I want my lawyer." "You will get one at your arraignment tomorrow morning in federal court, not yours." They handcuffed him. The cold metal against his wrists felt like the end of the world. They walked him out of his courthouse, the building where he had presided for 2 decades, where his nameplate still hung on the door, where his portrait hung in the hallway with other distinguished jurists. The press was waiting outside. FBI had tipped them off. The image of a handcuffed judge being arrested went national within the hour. Back at the community center, the last of the crowd was dispersing. FBI agents were packing up equipment, taking final statements, collecting evidence. The projection screen had been unplugged, the damning images finally dark, but their after image burned in everyone's retinas. Marcus and Lauren sat in the front row of empty chairs. The building felt bigger now, echoing, the absence of fear making it seem like a different space entirely. "Do you think it is really over?" Lauren's voice was quiet. "The arrests are over." Marcus squeezed her hand. "The trials will take months, years maybe. But we won." He looked at her, really looked at her. Saw the woman who had been assaulted in her own home. The woman who had turned that assault into a federal case. The woman who had just brought down a corrupt HOA president and a dirty judge. "We won." She let out a breath she had been holding for months. For 6 months since the raid. For 2 years since they had moved to Meadowbrook. For her entire life, maybe, building toward this moment. "I want to go home." Her voice broke slightly on the last word. They walked out together. The parking lot was nearly empty now. Their cars sat side by side under a streetlight, bathed in orange glow. The suburban quiet that follows major events. When the world tries to pretend nothing has changed, even though everything has. Marcus opened her car door for her. Old habit. Small gesture, but tonight it felt important. A reminder that chivalry and strength could coexist. That being protected and being powerful were not mutually exclusive. "I will see you at home." He kissed her forehead. She nodded, started the engine. But before she backed out, she rolled down the window. "Marcus?" "Yeah." "We make a good team." He smiled. "The best." The drive home took 7 minutes. 7 minutes through quiet streets lined with perfect houses and perfect lawns and lives that looked perfect from the outside. But Marcus knew now that perfection was a lie, that behind closed doors, people suffered, that pretty facades hid ugly truths, that the only thing that mattered was courage. The courage to stand up when standing up was dangerous. The courage to fight back when fighting seemed futile. The courage to believe that justice was possible even when the system was rigged. He pulled into his driveway. Lauren was already there, standing on the porch, waiting for him. The house behind her glowed with warm light. Their house, their home, the place Diane Winters had violated and they had reclaimed. He climbed the porch steps, took her hand. Together they stood there, looking out over Meadowbrook Estates. Lights were on in houses up and down the street. Families inside, eating dinner, watching TV, living lives that were now a little bit safer because 2 people had refused to be victims. "It starts tomorrow." Lauren's voice was steady. "Building the case for trial." Marcus nodded. "I know. You are sure you want to do this? The trials could take a year, maybe more." He looked at her, saw the determination in her eyes, the fire that had never gone out even when Todd Ellis had grabbed her arm, even when Diane Winters had mocked her, even when the local police had refused to help. She was a force of nature, and he had the privilege of standing beside her. "I have never been more sure of anything." They went inside, locked the door behind them, made tea. sat together on the couch that had been destroyed and replaced, in the living room that had been violated and reclaimed. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and paperwork and the slow grind of the legal system. But tonight, they had this moment, this victory, this proof that ordinary people could stand against tyranny and win. In a cell at the county jail, Diane Winters sat on a metal bench, still wearing her red blazer and pearls, still trying to understand how her perfect plan had become a perfect disaster. The other inmates watched her with the casual cruelty of people who could smell weakness. She was not the HOA president here. She was not anyone important. She was just another inmate who thought she was above the law and learned otherwise. In a different cell, Judge Harrison lay on a thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, watching his entire legacy collapse in his mind like a building imploding. 20 years on the bench, gone. Reputation, gone. Freedom, gone. All for $43,000 and the ego boost of being powerful. In a modest apartment across town, Todd Ellis sat at his kitchen table, head in his hands, wire still taped to his chest because he was too numb to remove it. He had done the right thing. He knew that intellectually, but emotionally, he felt like a traitor, a coward, a man without honor. The road to redemption, he was learning, starts with feeling like you do not deserve it. But in a small house on the edge of Meadowbrook Estates, Patricia Morgan sat in her living room surrounded by boxes of documents, 3 years of meticulous record-keeping, and she smiled. Really smiled. She had not been able to save her home, but she had helped save the community, and sometimes that was enough. Marcus and Lauren finished their tea, rinsed the cups, turned off the downstairs lights one by one. They climbed the stairs together, his hand on the small of her back, her shoulder against his chest. Small intimacies, simple comforts. The foundation of a marriage built on respect and partnership, and the shared belief that doing the right thing mattered. In bed, Lauren turned off the lamp. Darkness filled the room. But it was not the darkness of fear. It was the darkness of peace, of safety, of home. "Marcus," she whispered. "Yeah? Thank you for believing in me." He pulled her close, always. They fell asleep that way, wrapped around each other, victorious, exhausted, ready for the long fight ahead. Because they both knew the arrest was just the beginning. The trial would be brutal. Diane's lawyers would be expensive and aggressive. Judge Harrison's connections ran deep. The system they were challenging was built to protect people like them. But Marcus and Lauren Chen had something more powerful than money or connections. They had evidence. They had witnesses. They had the law on their side. And most importantly, they had each other. Outside, Meadowbrook Estates slept. For the first time in 3 years, it slept without fear, without patrols, without the shadow of Diane Winters looming over every mailbox and every lawn and every small choice about how to live your own life in your own home. The price of power, it turned out, was everything. Diane Winters had learned that lesson, and tomorrow the rest of the country would start learning it too. Because this story was not staying in Meadowbrook. It was going national, and with it would come a reckoning for every petty tyrant with a clipboard and a god complex who thought that HOA stood for the right to terrorize their neighbors. But that was tomorrow. Tonight was for rest, for peace, for the quiet satisfaction of a battle won and a war begun. Marcus and Lauren Chen had fired the first shot, and they would not stop until the entire corrupt system came crashing down. Justice, they had learned, was not given. It was taken, and they had very good hands for taking. The federal courthouse in Denver rose from the city streets like a monument to judgment itself. Gray stone, tall windows, American flags snapping in the wind with sounds like rifle shots. Marcus Chen stood on the steps at 8 in the morning, watching news vans assemble like an invading army. Satellite dishes extended toward the sky, reporters checking makeup and phone cameras, the machinery of modern justice grinding into motion. Beside him, Lauren adjusted the collar of her navy suit, the same one she had worn to the sting, the same one she would wear every day of this trial like armor. Her hands were steady, no tremor, no hesitation. She had prosecuted cartel members who would have killed her given the chance. Diane Winters was just another criminal in designer clothes. The media spotted them. Cameras swiveled. Reporters surged forward like a wave breaking against shore. Agent Chen, how does it feel to take down a corrupt HOA president? Mr. Chen, will you testify? Mrs. Chen, are you officially on the prosecution team? Marcus raised one hand, the gesture of a man accustomed to command. His voice carried across the courthouse steps with the weight of authority. Justice is not about feelings. It is about evidence. We have evidence. That is all that matters. They pushed through the crowd, shoulders together, a united front. Inside, the courthouse was all marble and echo. Their footsteps rang out in the vast lobby like drumbeats announcing war. Security checkpoint, metal detectors, the ritual of entering a space where truth was supposed to matter more than power. Courtroom 6B, third floor, Judge Patricia Hammond presiding. The courtroom was already packed when they entered. Every seat filled, standing room only in the back. The public had come to watch the fall of a tyrant. Americans love nothing more than seeing the powerful brought low. Diane Winters sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit. The transformation was shocking. No red blazer, no pearls, no shellacked hair. She looked diminished, smaller, as if the removal of her costume had revealed the ordinary, frightened woman beneath. Her lawyer, Martin Cross, sat beside her in a $1,500 suit, compensation for defending the indefensible. Judge Patricia Hammond entered. Everyone rose. She was 68 years old with steel gray hair and the demeanor of someone who had seen every trick in the book and was not impressed by any of them. Former prosecutor herself. No patience for games. The gavel came down like a period ending a sentence. Be seated. We are here for the arraignment of Diane Marie Winters, federal charges. The clerk read the charges. Each count landed like a stone dropping into still water. Criminal trespass under color of law, assault, wire fraud, computer fraud and abuse, conspiracy to commit extortion, conspiracy against rights. The list went on, 17 counts total, each carrying years of prison time. How does the defendant plead? Martin Cross stood, smooth, professional, the kind of lawyer who could make a guilty plea sound like a negotiating position. My client pleads not guilty to all charges, Your Honor. The words hung in the air, not guilty, as if 350 people had not watched her commit these crimes on Facebook Live, as if the evidence did not exist in high-definition video and sworn testimony and digital forensics. But this was the game. Everyone played their part. Bail hearing. Cross argued his case with practiced ease. Community leader. Strong ties to Colorado. No flight risk. Significant charitable work. He made Diane sound like a civic saint who had made a few regrettable mistakes. Lauren watched from the gallery, her jaw tight, her hands folded in her lap to keep from clenching. She knew this dance. She had danced it 100 times from the other side. The defense always made their client sound sympathetic. That was their job, but it did not make it less infuriating. The prosecution stood. Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Kim, 50 years old, Korean American, a reputation for being brilliant and ruthless in equal measure. She did not waste words. Your Honor, the defendant orchestrated a systematic campaign of terror against her neighbors for 3 years. She stole $87,000 from HOA funds. She ordered assaults on at least 4 residents. She compromised federal witness protection information. She has significant financial resources through her ex-husband. She has demonstrated contempt for law and authority. She is exactly the kind of defendant who will flee if given the opportunity. Judge Hammond did not hesitate. Bail denied. Defendant remanded to federal custody pending trial. Diane's face crumpled. For the first time, the reality seemed to penetrate. She was not going home. She was going back to jail. And she would stay there until this was over. No? The word came out strangled. Your Honor, please. I have a home. I have responsibilities. I am not a criminal. Hammond's gaze could have frozen lava. You are accused of 17 federal crimes. That is the definition of criminal. Sit down. Marshals led her out through the side door. She looked back once at the packed courtroom, searching for allies, finding none. Every face watching her exit with satisfaction or pity or cold indifference. The Queen of Meadowbrook Estates reduced to inmate number 847362. In a different courtroom, same building, Judge Robert Harrison was experiencing his own arraignment. His lawyer, Elizabeth Reeves, was arguably even more expensive than Cross. $800 an hour, former state attorney general, connections that ran deep into Colorado's power structure. But federal charges do not care about state connections. Harrison stood in his own orange jumpsuit. The indignity of it burned in his eyes. 20 years on the bench, reduced to this, a defendant in the system he once commanded. His charges were fewer, but more severe. Bribery, judicial corruption, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, each one a betrayal of the oath he had sworn. The evidence against him was mathematical. $43,000 in kickbacks traced to an offshore account. 47 HOA cases in 3 years. 46 ruled in favor of HOAs. 12 of those cases involving Diane's Meadowbrook HOA. 100% ruling rate for her. The pattern was undeniable. Bail denied for Harrison, too. Flight risk, access to resources, history of abusing judicial authority. He would await trial in the same federal detention center as Diane, separated by gender wings, but united in their fall from grace. The media erupted. Headlines wrote themselves. Judge jailed in HOA corruption scandal. Federal sting takes down suburban tyrant. The story had everything: abuse of power, ordinary citizens fighting back, dramatic arrests. It spread across cable news like wildfire in dry grass. For the next 4 months, Lauren Chen lived in 2 worlds simultaneously. During the day, she was special prosecutor, FBI office, evidence review, witness preparation, building the case that would end Diane Winters. At night, she was wife and almost mother, home with Marcus, planning for the family they would start after this was done. The balance was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. The evidence mountain grew. Todd Ellis's wire recordings, Kevin Park's USB drive with its malware payload, the emails between Diane and Harrison planning their compliance warrant scheme, financial records showing the flow of money from HOA fines to Diane's personal accounts to Harrison's offshore haven, 8 victim testimonies, Lauren's smartwatch video, Marcus's FBI digital forensics reports. Sarah Kim spread it all across the conference table like a general planning a campaign. We have her on every charge. The question is not whether we can convict. The question is how spectacularly we can prove it. Lauren studied the evidence with prosecutor eyes, looking for weaknesses, finding none. Diane had been thorough in her tyranny, but sloppy in her arrogance. She had documented her own crimes, broadcast them, celebrated them. She had handed the prosecution a perfect case wrapped in a bow. The defense strategy became clear through pre-trial motions. Martin Cross was going for sympathy. Diane as misguided volunteer who cared too much. HOA president doing her best to maintain standards. No criminal intent, just overzealous enforcement of rules she genuinely believed in. It was weak, but it was all he had. Motions to suppress evidence, denied. The smartwatch recording was legal under Colorado's one-party consent law. Lauren was a party to the interaction. Motion to exclude Todd's testimony as unreliable, denied. His immunity deal was standard practice and did not automatically make him unreliable. Motion to separate the charges and try them individually, denied. They were all part of the same pattern of criminal conduct. Cross tried everything, threw everything at the wall hoping something would stick. Nothing did. Judge Hammond was too experienced, too sharp. She had seen these tactics before and was unimpressed. Meanwhile, the defendants Kevin Park and Gary Stone took plea deals. 2 years for Kevin, 18 months for Gary, in exchange for their testimony against Diane. Each conversation with their lawyers followed the same pattern. You can fight this and lose at trial and get 10 years, or you can testify truthfully and serve less than 2. The math was simple. They both chose survival. Jeff Miller, the youngest security patrol member, got probation and community service. He was 23, clearly manipulated. The judge saw a kid who made stupid choices, not a career criminal. But he would testify too. Add his voice to the chorus saying Diane gave the orders. Diane planned everything. Diane was the architect of their crimes. Only Todd Ellis had immunity. But his testimony came with a price. The weight of what he had done sat on him like a physical burden. Lauren saw it in their preparation sessions. The way he could not quite meet her eyes when discussing the raid. the way his voice broke when describing how he had grabbed her arm. One afternoon in the FBI conference room, 3 weeks before trial, Todd stopped mid-sentence, put his head in his hands. "I am sorry. I know I have said it before, but I need you to know what I did to you. There is no excuse." Lauren looked at him for a long moment, weighing, judging. Then she spoke with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. "You are right. There is no excuse. But there is explanation. Diane exploited your desire to matter, to have purpose, to be part of something important. She turned that into a weapon. You let her. That is on you. But you are trying to make it right. That counts for something." Todd lifted his head, eyes red. "Is it enough?" Lauren considered. "No, it will never be enough. Patricia Morgan lost her home. Dr. Wilson was extorted. The Nakamura's children were terrorized. I was assaulted. You cannot undo any of that. But you can make sure it does not happen to anyone else. That is the only redemption available to you." He nodded, understood. The conversation ended, but something had shifted. Todd straightened in his chair. When they resumed preparation, his voice was stronger. He would testify. He would tell the truth. He would face Diane's lawyer and the jury and the world and admit what he had done, because it was all he could do. The trial began on a Monday in October, autumn in Denver, leaves turning golden red, the kind of crisp morning that promised winter was coming but had not yet arrived. The courthouse steps were packed with media again. But this time, there were protesters too. Signs reading "HOA tyranny stops here" and "Justice for Meadowbrook." The case had touched a nerve. Millions of Americans lived under HOA rules. Many felt powerless against them. This trial was their proxy war. Marcus and Lauren arrived together. Marcus in a dark suit, FBI badge visible on his belt. Lauren in her navy armor. They had discussed whether she should sit at the prosecution table or in the gallery. She was technically a consultant, not the lead prosecutor. But Sarah Kim had insisted. "Your case. Your seat." The courtroom filled quickly. Press in the back rows, victims in the middle, Patricia Morgan, Dr. Wilson, the Nakamura family. Each one ready to testify, ready to make Diane face what she had done. In the front row, reserved seating, Marcus sat alone, a silent presence, a reminder that behind the legal machinery was a family that had been violated. Diane entered in civilian clothes now. Her lawyer had fought for that. Juries respond better to defendants who look like normal people instead of inmates. She wore a simple gray dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back, an attempt to appear humble, contrite. But her eyes betrayed her, still angry, still convinced she was the victim here. The jury filed in, 7 women, 5 men, ages ranging from 30 to 70, diverse backgrounds, carefully selected through weeks of voir dire. Each one had been questioned extensively about their opinions on HOAs, authority, law enforcement. Each one had sworn they could be impartial. Now they would decide Diane's fate. Judge Hammond called the court to order. Opening statements, the moment when each side presents their theory of the case. When narrative becomes argument, when story becomes law. Sarah Kim stood, walked to the jury box, made eye contact with each juror. Her voice when she spoke was clear and strong and absolutely certain. "Good morning. My name is Sarah Kim. I am an assistant United States attorney. 3 months ago, Diane Winters ordered her private security force to break into Marcus and Lauren Chen's home. They did not knock and wait for permission. They picked the lock. They entered without consent. They destroyed property. They assaulted Lauren Chen. They hacked into a federal agent's computer network. And Diane Winters filmed the entire thing and broadcast it on Facebook to 350 people." She paused. Let that image settle in the jurors' minds. Why did she do this? Because Marcus Chen had parked his truck in his own driveway. Because he had installed solar panels on his own roof. Because he had dared to question her authority as HOA president. This case is about power, the abuse of power. What happens when someone with no legal authority decides the rules do not apply to them, that they are above the law, that they can terrorize their neighbors with impunity? Sarah walked along the jury box, each step measured, deliberate. "Over the next few weeks, you will hear from victims. Patricia Morgan, a 70-year-old widow who lost her home because Diane Winters wanted to make an example of her. Dr. Wilson, a respected physician who was blackmailed over personal financial information. The Nakamura family, whose children were traumatized by threats of Child Protective Services. And Lauren Chen, who was assaulted in her own home by men following Diane Winters' orders. You will see evidence, video of the assault, emails planning the crimes, financial records showing theft, digital forensics proving conspiracy. The evidence is overwhelming. It is undeniable. And it proves beyond any reasonable doubt that Diane Winters is guilty of every single charge. Sarah returned to her table, sat down. The opening statement had taken less than 5 minutes. Brevity is power. She had given the jury a framework. Now the evidence would fill it in. Martin Cross stood for the defense. He was older than Sarah, mid-60s, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of lawyer who exuded confidence even when representing the guilty. His approach was different, softer, more personal. Ladies and gentlemen, Diane Winters dedicated her life to her community. She volunteered hundreds of hours as HOA president. She enforced rules she did not create. She tried to maintain property values for everyone's benefit. Did she make mistakes? Yes. Was she sometimes overzealous? Absolutely. But criminal? No. Criminal requires intent. Criminal requires malice. What you will see is a woman who cared deeply about her neighborhood and made errors in judgment while trying to protect it. It was a valiant effort. But the jury's faces showed skepticism. They had already seen the news coverage, already knew the broad strokes. Cross was asking them to believe their eyes had deceived them. The first witness was Lauren Chen. She walked to the stand like she was walking into battle, raised her right hand, swore to tell the truth, sat down, and looked directly at the jury. No fear, no hesitation. This was her element. Sarah Kim led her through the testimony with surgical precision. Please state your name and occupation. Lauren Elizabeth Chen. I am a former federal prosecutor. I retired 2 years ago to write novels. Can you tell the jury what happened on the afternoon of August 14th? Lauren's voice never wavered. She described the raid, the illegal entry, Todd grabbing her arm, Kevin smashing her phone, Gary holding her while they searched, Diane filming everything and mocking her, the destruction of Marcus's office, the scattering of federal files, the humiliation of strangers pawing through her underwear drawer while 300 people watched on Facebook. The jury was riveted. You could have heard a pin drop. How did you feel during this invasion? Lauren paused, considered, terrified, violated, helpless, and furious. Furious that these people thought they had the right to do this, that they would get away with it, that no one would stop them. Sarah played the smartwatch video. 87 minutes of footage. The jury watched in silence. Some looked uncomfortable, some looked angry. One older woman in the front row had tears in her eyes. When Todd's hand appeared on screen, gripping Lauren's arm, twisting it until she cried out, several jurors winced. Martin Cross's cross-examination was careful, almost gentle. He knew attacking the victim would backfire. Mrs. Chen, you recorded this video without informing the defendants, correct? Colorado is a one-party consent state. I was a party to the interaction. The recording is legal. You are also working as a prosecutor on this case. Isn't that unusual? I am a consultant. My role is to provide expertise. But I am testifying as a witness to crimes I experienced. There is no conflict. Cross tried a few more angles. Got nowhere. Lauren had prosecuted for 15 years. She knew every trick. She parried every question with calm precision. After 20 minutes, Cross gave up. No further questions. Lauren stepped down, walked back to the prosecution table, sat beside Sarah. She had done her job, told the truth. Let the jury see her not as a victim but as a survivor, someone who had been hurt but refused to be broken. Marcus testified next. FBI credentials, 14 years of service, expertise in cybercrime. He explained how Kevin's USB drive had triggered automatic intrusion alerts, how the malware on it was sophisticated, how it had been used to hack 8 different Meadowbrook residents over 2 years. This was not amateur hour. Marcus's voice had the flat authority of an expert witness. This was premeditated, planned, executed with precision. The malware alone cost approximately $4,500 on the dark web. Someone purchased this, Someone deployed it. Someone collected the stolen data and weaponized it against residents. He showed the jury Diane's laptop, files organized by resident name, each file containing stolen information, bank records, emails, medical histories, the digital evidence of a systematic criminal enterprise. Cross tried to suggest Kevin acted alone, that Diane did not know about the hacking. Marcus destroyed that theory in 3 sentences. The purchase was made from Diane Winters' credit card. The laptop containing the stolen data belonged to Diane Winters. Diane Winters was copied on emails discussing what information to target. She knew. She planned it. She paid for it. Then came Todd Ellis. He walked to the witness stand like a man approaching the gallows, hand trembling slightly as he swore the oath, sat down, looked at the jury with naked shame. Sarah Kim was gentle with him. She knew his testimony was crucial, but also painful. Please state your name and tell the jury your role in this case. Todd Robert Ellis. I was the chief of Meadowbrook Security Patrol. I was one of the defendants. I took a plea deal. I have immunity in exchange for truthful testimony. Tell us how you came to work for Diane Winters. Todd's voice was quiet but clear. She recruited me 2 years ago. Said the neighborhood needed protection, needed enforcement. I am former military. I wanted to serve again, to matter. She gave me that purpose. Or I thought she did. What were your duties? We patrolled at night, documented violations, photographed properties. At first it seemed legitimate, community watch, but it escalated. Diane started ordering us to intimidate residents, to shine lights in windows, to make ourselves visible, to create fear. The jury leaned forward. This was new information, evidence of systematic intimidation. Did you participate in the raid on the Chen residence? Yes. Todd's voice broke slightly. Diane said they were dangerous, that Lauren Chen was a lawyer who was trying to destroy the HOA, that we needed to search for evidence of violations. She said it was legal, that she had a warrant. I believed her. What did you do during the raid? I grabbed Lauren Chen's arm. She was trying to call 911. I twisted her arm to make her stop. I held her while the others searched the house. I helped destroy her life for no reason except that Diane Winters told me to. The courtroom was silent. The only sound was the soft whir of the court reporter's machine. Why are you testifying today? Because I need to make this right. I cannot undo what I did. But I can tell the truth. I can make sure Diane Winters faces consequences, and I can warn others. Anyone who offers you power without authority is offering you a prison sentence. I learned that too late. I hope others learn from my mistake. Martin Cross's cross-examination was brutal. You got immunity, correct? You are testifying to save yourself from prison? You were the one who actually grabbed Mrs. Chen, not my client? You have every reason to lie to protect yourself? Todd absorbed every blow, admitted every truth. Yes, I have immunity. Yes, I am saving myself. Yes, I physically assaulted her. And yes, I did it because Diane Winters ordered me to. She planned it. She directed it. She celebrated it afterward. Those are facts. My immunity does not change them. The prosecution called 8 victims over the next 3 days. Each one told their story. Patricia Morgan, voice shaking but steady, describing how Diane had targeted her in her grief. Dr. Wilson explaining the blackmail. The Nakamuras talking about their daughter's nightmares. The cumulative effect was devastating. By the time the prosecution rested, the jury had heard from 11 witnesses, seen hours of video, reviewed hundreds of pages of documents. The pattern was undeniable. Diane Winters had run Meadowbrook Estates like a personal kingdom, and she had crushed anyone who challenged her authority. Then the defense called its only witness, Diane Winters herself. She took the stand in her humble gray dress. Martin Cross led her through a carefully scripted performance. She talked about her divorce, how the HOA had given her purpose when her marriage ended, how she had tried to maintain standards, how she had believed she was helping. I never meant to hurt anyone. Her voice was soft, apologetic. I thought I was protecting property values. I thought the compliance inspections were legal. Judge Harrison helped me draft the warrant. I trusted him. He was a judge. I thought he knew the law. It was a calculated strategy. Blame the judge. Claim ignorance, paint herself as misguided rather than malicious. Then Lauren Chen stood for cross-examination. The courtroom energy shifted. Everyone had been waiting for this. The victim confronting the perpetrator. The former prosecutor versus the HOA tyrant. This was the climax. Lauren walked to the podium, placed her notes down, looked directly at Diane. Her voice when she spoke was calm, professional, deadly. Ms. Winters, you said you never meant to hurt anyone. Is that correct? Yes. Diane's voice was small. Lauren pulled up an email on the screen. Let me show you Exhibit 47. An email you sent to Todd Ellis 3 days before you raided my home. Can you read the highlighted portion for the jury? Diane's face went pale. She read slowly. Make sure the Chens understand they are not special. I want them broken financially and humiliated publicly. Lauren let that hang in the air. Does that sound like someone who did not mean to hurt anyone? I was. That was taken out of context. What context makes wanting to break someone financially and humiliate them publicly acceptable? No answer. Lauren moved to the next exhibit. You testified that you thought the compliance warrant was legal because Judge Harrison helped you draft it, correct? Yes. But you knew HOA bylaws do not supersede state law, correct? I thought. You are a college graduate, correct? Yes. You ran a successful business before your divorce, correct? Yes. So you are not stupid. You understand basic legal concepts. You knew that HOA president is not a government position. You knew you had no legal authority to enter homes without consent. You just did not care, correct? That is not. Diane was flustered now, losing composure. Lauren showed financial records. You collected $287,000 in fines over 3 years. Only $140,000 reached the HOA account. Where did the other $87,000 go? Administrative costs, legal fees. Your personal bank account shows deposits totaling $87,300 over the same 3-year period, matching the missing HOA funds. You stole from your neighbors, correct? Those were reimbursements. For what? Your Lexus payment? Your spa membership? Your vacation to Aspen? Diane had no answer. The jury was watching her crumble. Lauren played the clip from the Facebook live stream. Diane's voice on the video, triumphant and cruel. See this, Meadowbrook? This is what happens when you do not comply. The Chens thought they were special. Now they know better. Lauren paused the video. Does that sound like someone who made an innocent mistake? I was trying to show. You were bragging, you were celebrating, you assaulted my family and you celebrated it on social media, correct? Diane's composure finally broke. I did what I thought was right. That is not what I asked. Do you feel any remorse for what you did? To me? To Patricia Morgan? To the Nakamura children? Long silence. The courtroom held its breath. I was protecting property values. Diane's voice was defensive, defiant. So no remorse. That silence was the loudest sound in the courtroom. The jury had seen everything they needed to see. Diane Winters was unrepentant. She still believed she was right. She still thought she was the victim. No further questions. Lauren sat down. Diane left the stand looking smaller than when she had arrived. She had gambled on sympathy, had lost spectacularly. Closing arguments came 2 days later. Sarah Kim stood before the jury and summarized the evidence with prosecutorial precision. Martin Cross made his best argument for mercy. Neither outcome was in doubt. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, their faces showed the weight of what they had decided. The foreman stood, an older man, retired engineer. He read the verdict with a steady voice. Count 1, civil rights violations. We find the defendant guilty. Count 2, wire fraud. Guilty. Count 3, computer fraud. Guilty. All 17 counts. Guilty on every single one. Diane collapsed in her chair, sobbing. Her lawyer tried to comfort her, but she was beyond comfort. The jury had spoken. The law had judged. Justice had arrived. Justice. Judge Harrison's trial followed a similar trajectory. Faster, more evidence, less sympathy. He was convicted on 8 counts of corruption. His lawyer filed immediate appeals. They were denied. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. Judge Hammond's courtroom. Victim impact statements first. Patricia Morgan spoke about losing her home. Dr. Wilson about the blackmail. Lauren about the assault and the lasting trauma. Then Hammond delivered sentence. Ms. Winters, you terrorized your community for 3 years. You stole from your neighbors. You ordered assaults. You showed no remorse until you were caught. And even on the stand, your apology rang hollow. I sentence you to 18 years in federal prison, $500,000 in restitution to your victims. You will serve at least 15 years before you are eligible for parole. Diane screamed. 18 years. She would be 70 when she got out. If she got out. Harrison got 12 years. Disbarred, pension stripped, legacy destroyed. He took the sentence in silence. What else could he do? Outside the courthouse, Marcus and Lauren stood on the steps, media shouting questions. They ignored them, walked to their car, drove home in silence. What was there to say? They had won. Justice had been served. But victory felt quieter than expected, less triumphant, more like the end of a long illness, relief, exhaustion, the knowledge that healing would take time. That night they sat on their porch, the same porch where this had all begun. Meadowbrook Estates spread out before them, quiet, peaceful, free. Is it over? Lauren's voice was soft. Marcus took her hand. The trial is over. The healing starts now. They sat in the darkness. Two people who had faced tyranny and refused to break. Two people who had turned violation into vindication. Two people who had proved that justice was possible if you were willing to fight for it. In a federal prison 200 miles away, Diane Winters lay on a thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. 18 years. The words echoed in her mind like a curse. She had ruled Meadowbrook Estates for 3 years. She would spend 18 years learning what it felt like to be powerless. But that was not Marcus and Lauren's concern. They had other things to think about, a family to start, a community to rebuild, a life to live without fear. The price of power had been paid, and they were finally, completely, beautifully free. 6 months after the verdict, Lauren Chen stood in the Colorado State Capitol building, sunlight streaming through tall windows behind her like a blessing from above. The legislative chamber was packed. Rows of polished wooden desks filled with senators and representatives, gallery seats overflowing with journalists, advocates, victims of HOA abuse from across the state. The air hummed with anticipation. History was being written in real time. Lauren wore the navy suit, always the navy suit. It had become her armor, her symbol, the costume of a woman who had turned personal violation into systemic change. She stood at the podium with her hands resting lightly on the wood. No notes, no prepared statement. She had lived this testimony. She did not need to read it. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Lauren Chen. 6 months ago, I was assaulted in my own home by an HOA president who believed she was above the law. Today, I am here to make sure that never happens to another family. Her voice carried across the chamber with the clarity of purpose. No tremor, no hesitation. This was what she had been training for her entire career. Not just prosecuting criminals, preventing crime itself. She told them the statistics. 47 HOA abuse cases she had consulted on in the past year. A pattern visible from space. Unchecked power leading to inevitable corruption. Vulnerable homeowners targeted. Elderly widows, young families. Anyone who dared question authority. The numbers were staggering. The human cost incalculable. Then she told them about Diane Winters, the reign of terror, the illegal searches, the extortion, the systematic destruction of lives. She did not dramatize, did not need to. The facts spoke for themselves. And when she finished, when she presented the Homeowner Protection Act with its provisions for state oversight and criminal penalties and whistleblower protections, the chamber erupted in applause. The bill passed unanimously, 47-0 in the Senate, 65-0 in the House. Governor signed it the following week with Lauren standing beside him for the photo. The image went national. Former HOA victim becomes architect of reform. It was the kind of story America loved. Regular people standing up to bullies, David versus Goliath, justice prevailing. Marcus watched from the gallery, pride radiating from him like heat. His wife had taken personal trauma and transformed it into public good. She had turned pain into policy. That was strength. That was courage. That was the woman he had married. 200 miles away, in a federal women's prison, Diane Winters sat in a therapy session with Dr. Ellen Martinez. The prison psychologist had been working with Diane for 6 months. Progress had been glacial, painful, like pulling teeth from concrete. Diane wore standard-issue prison khakis. No makeup, gray hair growing out at the roots where expensive dye jobs used to keep her looking younger. She looked every one of her 57 years. Prison-aged people. Stripped away the cosmetic veneer and revealed the truth underneath. "Tell me about your week, Diane." Dr. Martinez's voice was patient. She had worked with hundreds of inmates, knew that real change took time. "I worked in the kitchen." Diane's voice was flat, monotone. "Cleaned dishes for 12 cents an hour. Got into an argument with my cellmate over who gets the top bunk. Very glamorous." "Do you still think about Meadowbrook?" "Every day." Diane's hands clenched in her lap. "Every single day. I built that community. I made it beautiful. I protected property values, and now I am here while they enjoy what I created." Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "That is what we need to talk about. You say you built it. You say you protected it. But Diane, you terrorized it. You destroyed families. You stole money. You assaulted people. That is not protection. That is tyranny." Diane's jaw tightened. The words she wanted to say, the denials, the justifications, they sat on her tongue like poison she could not quite spit out. "I know you want to defend yourself." Dr. Martinez's voice was gentle but firm. "I know you want to explain how you were right and everyone else was wrong. But until you stop defending what you did and start accepting responsibility, you will never heal. You will spend 18 years being angry. Or you can spend it becoming a better person. The choice is yours." The session ended. Diane walked back to her cell in silence. Her cellmate, a woman serving time for embezzlement, looked up from a book. "Tough day?" Diane sat on her bunk, stared at the wall. "Yeah." But something had shifted, just slightly, like a door opening a crack. The defenses were wearing thin. The anger was exhausting. And for the first time since her arrest, Diane allowed herself to think the unthinkable. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was wrong. It was a small thought, fragile, but it was a beginning. Todd Ellis stood in the lobby of Denver Children's Hospital, security guard uniform pressed and clean, badge polished until it caught the light. 6 months had passed since the trial. 6 months of living with guilt that felt like a physical weight pressing on his chest. But he was trying to be better, trying to make amends. His shift was quiet, checking visitor IDs, walking rounds through colorful corridors decorated with murals of animals and rainbows, watching families come and go, parents holding sick children, doctors moving with purposeful urgency. It was honest work, simple work, the kind of work that did not require him to hurt anyone. During his lunch break, he sat in the cafeteria and opened his laptop. The website he had created 3 months ago was getting traffic. Former HOA enforcers warning. He had told his story there. Everything. The recruitment, the patrols, the intimidation, the raid on the Chen home, his testimony, his shame. The comment section was active, people sharing their own HOA horror stories, others thanking him for his honesty, a few calling him a coward and a traitor. He read them all, absorbed the criticism, accepted it as penance. One message caught his attention. An email from a lawyer in Arizona. "Mr. Ellis, I am representing a family being terrorized by their HOA. Your testimony in the Meadowbrook case established important precedent. Would you be willing to testify as an expert witness? We will cover all expenses." Todd stared at the message. Expert witness. Him. The man who had committed the crimes now being asked to help prosecute others who committed the same ones. The irony was not lost on him. He typed his response slowly. "I will testify. No fee required. This is how I make things right." He hit send, closed the laptop, went back to his rounds. A small step, but forward, always forward. Patricia Morgan sat in her new condo, smaller than her old house, but hers. No HOA, no rules except the ones she chose. Sunlight streamed through windows she could cover with whatever curtains she wanted. The walls were painted a shade of yellow she had always loved, but never been allowed to use in Meadowbrook. Freedom looked like paint color. The doorbell rang. She opened it to find Lauren Chen standing there, smile warm, arms full of grocery bags. "I brought lunch. Hope you are hungry." They had developed this routine, monthly visits, sometimes more, Lauren checking in, making sure Patricia was okay. But it had evolved beyond obligation. They were friends now, bonded by shared trauma and shared victory. They ate on the small balcony overlooking the mountains, sandwiches and lemonade, simple pleasures. The conversation wandered. Patricia's grandchildren, Lauren's pregnancy, now visible, a small swell beneath her blouse, the upcoming support group meeting for Meadowbrook victims. I got a letter this week. Patricia's voice was thoughtful. From my old neighbor, the one who supported Diane through everything. She hesitated. She apologized. Said she did not understand what Diane was really doing. Said she was sorry for not standing up for me. How does that make you feel? Patricia considered the question. Angry. Still. But also. She paused, searching for words. Also hopeful. If people can change their minds, if they can admit they were wrong, maybe we really did change something. We did. Lauren's voice was certain. The law passed. 8 other states are considering similar bills. 47 HOA officials arrested nationwide in the past 6 months. We started a movement. Because you refused to stay quiet. Because we all refused. Lauren reached across the table, squeezed Patricia's hand. You kept records for 3 years. You testified. You showed others it was possible to fight back. That is courage. Patricia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, healing tears. After 70 years of life, she had learned something important. It is never too late to matter. Marcus and Lauren's home had been transformed. Not just physically, though the damage from the raid was long erased. The transformation was deeper, spiritual. The house had been violated. Now it was consecrated, made sacred by the battle fought within its walls. Lauren stood in the nursery they had been preparing. Soft yellow walls, white furniture, a mobile hanging above the crib with stars and moons. She was 7 months pregnant now. A girl. They had decided to name her Grace, Grace Chen, for the grace they had given themselves to heal, for the grace they hoped to teach her. Marcus appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand, the morning ritual. How are you feeling? Tired, excited, terrified? She laughed. All of it at once. You are going to be an amazing mother. We are going to be amazing parents. She corrected him gently. We are in this together. He crossed the room, wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands resting on her belly where Grace was already kicking, already making her presence known. They stood like that for a long moment, quiet, grateful, aware of how close they had come to losing this, how Diane's invasion could have broken them, how they had chosen to be stronger instead. The HOA meeting tonight. Marcus's voice was soft. Are you sure you want to go? I am sure. The new board had invited them to join, not as president or vice president, just as members. Equal voices among equals. It was everything an HOA should be. Everything Meadowbrook had never been under Diane. That evening, the community center was full again, but the energy was completely different. No fear, no mandatory attendance. People had come because they wanted to, because they cared, because this was their community, and they were invested in making it better. The meeting started with budget review. Boring, necessary, democratic. Everyone got to see the numbers, ask questions, vote on expenditures. Transparency was the antidote to corruption. Then came new business, a proposal to install playground equipment in the common area. Discussion was lively. Some worried about liability. Others argued children needed safe places to play. A vote was taken. The playground won. Democracy in action. As the meeting ended, residents lingered, talking, laughing, sharing cookies someone had brought. This was what community was supposed to be. Not compliance and fear, connection and care. Dr. James Wilson approached Marcus and Lauren. He looked healthier than he had in years. The weight of blackmail lifted. His secret bankruptcy no longer a weapon someone could use against him. I wanted to thank you both. His voice was thick with emotion. For what you did. For all of us. We all did it together. Lauren's response was automatic, genuine. No. He shook his head. You could have taken your settlement and moved away, started over somewhere else. But you stayed. You fought. You changed the system. That takes a different kind of courage. The Nakamura family joined them. Emma and her husband. Their 2 daughters, now 9 and 11, giggling and chasing each other around the room. No trauma visible. Children were resilient when given safety and love. The girls want to know if they can babysit when Grace is born. Emma smiled. I told them newborns are too young, but maybe when she is older. We would love that. Lauren watched the girls play, imagining Grace among them someday. Growing up in a community defined by kindness instead of cruelty, that was the real victory. Across the country, the Meadowbrook case was having ripple effects no one had anticipated. Lauren's book, HOA Tyranny, A Prosecutor's Guide to Fighting Back, had been on the New York Times bestseller list for 3 months, sales approaching 400,000 copies. It was part memoir, part legal manual, part call to action. And it was resonating. Law schools were assigning it, victim advocacy groups using it as a template, state legislatures citing it in debates over HOA reform. The impact was exponential. One case in one Colorado suburb had sparked a national conversation about power and accountability and the rights of homeowners. Netflix had released a documentary, The Price of Power, The Meadowbrook Story, 6 episodes, interviews with Lauren, Marcus, the victims, even a jailhouse interview with Diane herself. That interview had been startling. Diane had agreed to participate against her lawyer's advice. She sat in the prison visiting room, dressed in khakis, no makeup, looking directly at the camera. "I was wrong." The words came out slowly, like she was learning a new language. "I terrorized my community. I destroyed families. I told myself I was protecting property values, but I was really protecting my ego. I could not stand anyone questioning my authority, so I crushed them." The interviewer asked if she felt remorse. Diane nodded. "Every day. Every single day. I think about Patricia Morgan losing her home, Dr. Wilson being blackmailed, the Nakamura children being terrified, Lauren Chen being assaulted. I did that. I ordered it. I celebrated it. There is no excuse. Do you think you deserve forgiveness?" "Number." Diane's voice was firm. "I do not deserve it. I can only hope that my mistakes prevent someone else from making them. That is the only redemption available to me." The documentary won an Emmy. More importantly, it sparked conversation. Viewing parties where HOA boards watched together and discussed what they could do differently. Universities using it in courses on governance and ethics. The impact spreading like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. Judge Robert Harrison did not get a redemption arc. He died in federal prison in year 5 of his 12-year sentence. Heart attack. 67 years old. Small funeral. Few attendees. His tombstone bore just his name and dates. No honorable, no judge. Just a man who had sold his integrity for $43,000 and lost everything. His cases were reviewed. 127 decisions examined. 34 overturned. Defendants freed. Justice delayed, but finally delivered. His legacy was not the career he had imagined, but a warning about what happens when judges forget they serve the law, not themselves. The 2-year anniversary of Diane's arrest arrived like a milestone marker. Meadowbrook Estates organized a celebration, not of her downfall, though that was part of it, but of what they had built in her absence, a real community, based on mutual respect instead of mutual fear. The community center was decorated, streamers, balloons, a banner reading Freedom Celebration. 200 residents packed the room, music played, children ran between tables, laughter echoed off walls that had once witnessed tyranny. Lauren was invited to speak. She stood at the podium, 8 months pregnant now, Grace pushing against her ribs like she was already eager to join the fight. Marcus sat in the front row, hand resting on the seat beside him, the spot he always saved for her. "2 years ago, I was assaulted in my home." Lauren's voice filled the space. "I could have stayed a victim. But I had a choice. We all had a choice. Stay silent or speak up. Accept tyranny or fight for justice. We chose to fight. And we won." The applause was thunderous. But winning is not the end. It is the beginning. We have to stay vigilant. Power corrupts when we stop paying attention. So we pay attention. We participate. We hold our leaders accountable. That is how we keep what we built. More applause. Patricia Morgan wiping tears, Dr. Wilson nodding, the Nakamuras holding hands. "And in 1 month, my husband and I will welcome a daughter into this world. Grace. She will grow up here, in Meadowbrook, in the community we saved. That is my hope, that every child born here grows up knowing they are safe. That is the legacy we build, not property values, safe childhoods." She sat down. The applause continued. Marcus squeezed her hand. "Well done." Todd Ellis was there too, invited by the victims he had helped terrorize. It was uncomfortable, awkward. Some residents still could not look at him, but others, including Patricia, had extended tentative forgiveness. He sat in the back row, quiet, grateful to be included at all. After the speeches, he approached Marcus and Lauren. "I wanted you to know," his voice was hesitant, "I have testified in 9 cases now, HOA abuse cases across 4 states, 3 convictions so far, more pending." "That is good work." Marcus's approval was measured but genuine. "It does not erase what I did." Number. Lauren's honesty was kinder than he deserved, but it helps others. That matters. Todd nodded, blinked back unexpected emotion. "I am going to keep doing it, for as long as courts will have me. It is the only way I know to make things right." They shook hands. A peace treaty. Not friendship, not absolution, but acknowledgement that people could change if they worked at it. The celebration continued into the evening. Food and music and the easy comfort of people who had survived something terrible together. Bonds forged in crisis. Community born from shared trauma and shared triumph. As the sun set, Marcus and Lauren stood on the community center porch, watching children play on the new playground equipment, the swings and slides that had been voted on democratically, installed professionally, paid for from HOA funds that were now transparent and accountable. "Worth it?" Marcus asked the question he had asked before. "Every second." Lauren's answer remained the same. They drove home through quiet streets. Meadowbrook Estates at twilight, porch lights coming on, families visible through windows, ordinary lives, safe lives. The kind of boring, beautiful normalcy that Diane Winters had tried to control and nearly destroyed. Their house glowed with warm light, the nursery upstairs waiting, Grace's arrival imminent, a future full of possibilities stretching out before them. That night, lying in bed, Lauren felt Grace kick hard against her ribs, Marcus's hand on her belly, feeling the movement, smiling in the darkness. "She is going to be a fighter." His voice was soft. "Good. She will need to be." Lauren's response was equally quiet. "The world needs fighters." They fell asleep like that, connected, peaceful. 2 people who had faced the worst and chosen to build something better. 2 people who understood that justice was not given but taken. That freedom required eternal vigilance. That communities were only as strong as their willingness to stand up to bullies. In the federal prison, Diane Winters lay awake too, staring at the ceiling. 16 years left to serve. The number was crushing. But Dr. Martinez's words echoed in her mind. You can spend it being angry, or you can spend it becoming better. For the first time, Diane chose better. She began writing. Not a justification, not a defense, but an honest accounting of how a middle-aged divorced woman became a tyrant. The psychology of it, the warning signs she had ignored, the rationalization she had believed, profile of an HOA abuser, 300 pages of painful self-examination. She showed it to Dr. Martinez. "Read this. Tell me if it is honest enough." Dr. Martinez read it over the course of a week. When she finished, she looked at Diane with something like respect. "This is honest, brutal, important. What do you want to do with it?" "Give it to Lauren Chen." Diane's voice was steady. "Let her use it however she thinks it can help. My worst mistakes should serve some purpose." The manuscript was sent. Lauren received it with skepticism, read it with growing surprise, showed it to Marcus. They discussed late into the night, finally decided. "We publish it. As an appendix to my next book. Anonymous, Prisoner 847362. Let her destruction teach prevention." The manuscript was published, became required reading for HOA board members in Colorado and 8 other states. Psychology programs used it as a case study. The most thorough autopsy of narcissism and power ever written by the person who embodied both. Diane would never know the full impact. Prison limited her access to the outside world. But Dr. Martinez told her, "Your words are helping people. You cannot undo the harm you caused, but you are preventing future harm. That is something." It was not forgiveness, it was not redemption, but it was purpose. And in prison, purpose was everything. Grace Elizabeth Chen was born on a Tuesday in October. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, blonde hair. Marcus's serious eyes, Lauren's determined chin. She came into the world screaming, already announcing her presence, already making demands. Marcus held her for the first time in the hospital room, this tiny, perfect human, and felt something shift in his chest, a reordering of priorities. His work mattered, justice mattered, but this mattered more. This fragile life they had created, this future they were responsible for protecting. Lauren watched him with grace and saw the man she had married become the father she had hoped for. Gentle, strong, completely besotted. The first visitors were Patricia Morgan and the Nakamuras. They brought gifts, flowers, casseroles, the practical offerings of people who understood what new parents needed. Patricia held Grace with the practiced ease of a grandmother. "You are going to change the world, little one, just like your parents." More visitors came over the following days. Dr. Wilson, colleagues from the FBI, a USA Sarah Kim, even Todd Ellis, who stayed only a moment, left a gift, a children's book about standing up to bullies, and departed before anyone could feel awkward. When they brought Grace home to Meadowbrook, neighbors lined the street. Welcome home signs, balloons, a community celebrating new life, the opposite of everything Diane Winters had built. She had ruled through fear. They were choosing love. That first night home, Marcus and Lauren took turns with the midnight feeding, Grace fussy and hungry and utterly dependent. Lauren sat in the nursery rocking chair, Grace at her breast, moonlight streaming through the window. Outside, the street was quiet, peaceful, safe. She thought about the journey, the raid, the investigation, the trial, the reforms, all the pain and fear and rage that had brought them to this moment. And she thought about the conversation she would have with Grace someday. When she was old enough to understand, "We will tell her what happened here." Marcus appeared in the doorway, reading her mind. "When she is old enough." Not to scare her, Lauren's voice was soft. To teach her that ordinary people can stand up to tyranny, that justice is possible, that courage matters. He crossed the room, kissed the top of her head, looked down at Grace, who had fallen asleep, milk-drunk and peaceful. "She is going to be amazing, because we will teach her to be. Not perfect, not compliant, amazing, strong and kind, and unwilling to accept injustice." They stood there together, a family, in a house that had been violated and reclaimed, in a community that had been terrorized and freed, in a country where the story of one HOA president's fall had sparked a movement for accountability and reform. The price of power, Diane Winters had learned, was everything. The price of justice, Marcus and Lauren had learned, was courage and patience and the willingness to fight even when the system seemed rigged. But the reward was this: a quiet house, a sleeping baby, a community at peace, a future worth protecting, not because someone with a clipboard and a God complex had decreed it, but because people had chosen it, had fought for it, had built it together. Outside, Meadowbrook Estate slept. No patrols, no fear, no shadow of tyranny, just ordinary people living ordinary lives in extraordinary freedom. And in the nursery, Grace Chen dreamed baby dreams, unaware that she had been born into a community her parents had helped save, that she would grow up hearing the story of how courage defeated cruelty, how justice defeated tyranny, how love defeated fear. The legacy was not property values or perfectly maintained lawns or compliance with arbitrary rules. The legacy was this: a child born free, a community built on respect, a reminder that power belongs to the people who refuse to be powerless. And somewhere in the darkness, in a prison cell 200 miles away, Diane Winters stared at a photograph of Meadowbrook Estates that she kept hidden in her notebook. The kingdom she had lost, the empire she had destroyed through her own arrogance. She traced the streets with her finger, remembered every house, every violation, every family she had terrorized. And for the first time in her life, she understood. Power was not something you took. It was something you earned through service, through humility, through caring more about people than property values. She had learned it too late. But maybe, through her manuscript, through her warnings, others would learn it in time. That was all she could hope for, all she deserved. Her mistakes teaching others, her destruction serving prevention. Her 18-year sentence, a cautionary tale about what happens when ordinary people think they are extraordinary, when neighborhood volunteers think they are dictators, when clipboard carriers think they are kings. The cycle was complete: crime and punishment, violation and vindication, tyranny and freedom. And in the end, as always, justice prevailed. Not because the system was perfect, but because ordinary people refused to accept anything less. Marcus and Lauren Chen had started as victims. They ended as victors. And the country they lived in, the system they believed in, was just a little bit better because they had refused to stay silent, because they had chosen courage over fear, because they had proved that even against entrenched power and corrupt authority, regular people could win if they were willing to fight for it. 5 years after Diane Winters was sentenced to federal prison, Marcus Chen stood in his backyard on a Saturday morning watching his daughter build a miniature community out of wooden blocks. Grace was 4 years old now, blonde curls catching sunlight, serious brown eyes studying her creation with the intensity of an architect reviewing blueprints. "No mean rules, Mommy." Grace arranged her stuffed animals around the blockhouses. "Everyone gets to play. Everyone shares." Lauren sat in a lawn chair nearby, 7 months pregnant with their second child, another girl. They were going to name her Hope, because after everything they had survived, hope felt like the right word for what they had built. "That is right, sweetheart." Lauren's voice was warm. "Communities work best when everyone is kind." Marcus watched this simple scene and felt gratitude wash over him like a wave. This was what they had fought for. Not revenge, not punishment. This. A safe backyard where his daughter could play without fear. Where kindness was the rule instead of compliance. Where childhood could be innocent. The years had been kind to them. Marcus had been promoted to supervisory special agent. He led the FBI cybercrime division and had created a specialized task force for HOA abuse cases. Domestic terrorism, he called it, because that was exactly what it was. Terrorizing law-abiding citizens in their own homes. Lauren had written 3 books. The first, HOA Tyranny, had sold over 400,000 copies and changed laws in 12 states. The second, a legal thriller based loosely on their experience, had been optioned by Netflix. The third was due out next month, a guide for communities on building healthy HOAs based on respect instead of fear. But more than professional success, they had built a life, a real life, grounded in family and community and the quiet satisfaction of knowing they had made the world slightly better. Meadowbrook Estates had become a model, featured in urban planning journals, studied by governance experts, the HOA that had been torn apart by tyranny and rebuilt itself through democracy. Property values had increased 41%, not because of strict rules and enforcement, because people wanted to live in a community where neighbors cared about each other. In a different part of Colorado, 200 miles from the Chen family's peaceful Saturday morning, Diane Winters sat in a prison therapy session, year 5 of her 18-year sentence. She was 57 now, gray hair grown out completely, no makeup, lines etched deep around her eyes and mouth. Prison-aged people, stripped away pretense and revealed truth. Dr. Ellen Martinez sat across from her with a notepad, and the patient expression of someone who had spent 5 years watching Diane transform from an arrogant tyrant into something resembling a human being capable of genuine remorse. "Tell me about this week, Diane." I finished the manuscript. Diane's voice was quieter than it used to be, softer. The sharp edges worn away by time and consequence. 300 pages. Everything. How I became what I became. The warning signs. The rationalizations. All of it. "How do you feel about it?" "Terrified." Diane's hands clasped in her lap. "What if it is not enough? What if people read it and still do what I did?" "Then you will have tried." Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "That is all anyone can do. You cannot undo the harm. But you can try to prevent future harm. That is the only redemption available." "I do not deserve redemption." Dr. Martinez's honesty was kind. "You do not. But you can earn something else. Purpose. The knowledge that your worst mistakes serve a greater good. That is not redemption. but it is something. Diane nodded. Understood. The conversation she never could have had 5 years ago. The humility she never could have accessed when she wore pearls and designer suits and believed she was untouchable. I want to send it to Lauren Chen. Diane's voice was steady. Let her use it however she thinks best. My destruction should at least serve as a warning. Dr. Martinez made a note. I will arrange it. The session ended. Diane walked back to her cell. Her cellmate, a woman serving time for embezzlement, looked up from a book. You okay? Yeah. Diane sat on her bunk. For the first time in 5 years, yeah. Something had fundamentally shifted. Not absolution, not forgiveness, but acceptance. She had done terrible things. She would pay for them for 13 more years. But she could choose how she spent that time. Angry and bitter. Or trying, in whatever small way available, to make something good come from her mistakes. She chose the latter. Grace Chen turned 4 in October. The party was held at the Meadowbrook Community Center, the same building where Diane Winters had been arrested 5 years earlier. But there was no ghost of that night in the decorations. Only balloons and streamers and a banner reading Happy Birthday Grace in bright, cheerful letters. 100 neighbors attended, children running between tables, adults chatting and laughing, the easy warmth of genuine community. Patricia Morgan brought a homemade cake. Dr. Wilson brought gifts. The Nakamura girls, now 14 and 16, helped organize games for the younger kids. Todd Ellis came too, still nervous, still aware that his presence made some people uncomfortable, but he had been invited by Grace herself, who did not know what he had done because she was too young to understand, and her parents had decided some stories could wait. Mr. Todd brought me a present. Grace held up a children's book about being brave. That is wonderful, sweetie. Lauren's smile was genuine. What do we say? Thank you, Mr. Todd. Todd's voice was thick. You are very welcome, Grace. He stayed for an hour, kept to the edges, helped clean up afterward. Small acts of service, the only language of atonement he knew. As guests were leaving, Patricia Morgan pulled Lauren aside. I have something to tell you. Her eyes were bright. My granddaughter is applying to law school. She wants to be a prosecutor. Because of you. Lauren felt tears prick her eyes. Because of us, all of us, we showed her what is possible. Patricia squeezed her hand. You showed all of us. That night, after Grace was asleep and the house was quiet, Marcus found Lauren in the nursery. They were preparing for hope. She stood by the crib, one hand on her swollen belly, looking at the yellow walls and white furniture and the future growing inside her. Thinking about the speech? Marcus knew the congressional hearing was weighing on her mind. Thinking about legacy. Lauren turned to him. What we are leaving for them, grace and hope. What kind of world? A better one. Marcus crossed the room, put his arms around her. Because we fought for it. Will it be enough? It will have to be. His voice was soft but certain. We cannot protect them from everything, but we can teach them to protect themselves, to stand up, to fight back when fighting is necessary. That is the legacy. She leaned against him, felt hope kick against her ribs, felt the weight of responsibility and the lightness of love and the complexity of bringing children into a world that was beautiful and broken in equal measure. 3 weeks later, Lauren stood in Washington, D.C., the House Oversight Committee chamber, testifying before Congress about the Homeowner Protection Act, federal legislation, the final piece of the puzzle they had been building for 5 years. The chamber was packed, representatives from both parties, journalists in the press gallery, advocates in the visitor seats, cameras recording for C-SPAN, history being made in the mundane machinery of democratic process. Lauren wore the Navy suit, always the Navy suit. 8 months pregnant now. Hope making her presence known with frequent kicks. But Lauren's voice was strong and clear. Members of the committee, my name is Lauren Chen. 5 years ago, I was assaulted in my own home by an HOA president who believed she was above the law. Today, that woman is in federal prison. But she is not unique. She is typical. Lauren presented statistics. 200 HOA officials arrested nationwide in 5 years. Patterns of abuse in 43 states. Systematic violations of civil rights hidden behind the veneer of community governance. The numbers were staggering. The human cost incalculable. Then she told stories. Patricia Morgan's forced sale. Dr. Wilson's blackmail. The Nakamura children's trauma. her own assault, individual faces attached to aggregate data, humans behind statistics. The proposed law would create federal oversight, criminal penalties for systematic abuse, mandatory arbitration, victim compensation funds, whistleblower protections, a comprehensive framework to prevent future Diane Winters from terrorizing future communities. Opposition came from predictable sources. Real estate lobby worried about overregulation, HOA industry claiming most boards were responsible, states' rights advocates resisting federal intrusion. Lauren dismantled each argument with prosecutorial precision. Property values increase in well-governed communities. Responsible boards have nothing to fear from oversight. Civil rights violations are federal crimes regardless of where they occur. Then Marcus testified. FBI expertise, case data, digital forensics, the systematic nature of HOA-related crimes. He spoke with the authority of 14 years in federal law enforcement. This is not a civil matter. This is organized crime, domestic terrorism, terrorizing citizens in their homes. Todd Ellis testified last, the most powerful testimony. Former abuser turned advocate. His foundation had helped 847 families fight HOA abuse in 5 years. He had testified in 34 criminal cases, 28 convictions. I was part of the problem. His voice carried across the chamber. I followed orders, I hurt people. I told myself I was helping when I was terrorizing. This law would have stopped me. It would have stopped Diane. It will stop the next one. Pass it. Please. The vote came 3 weeks later. House passed it 347 to 88. Senate passed it 73 to 27. President signed it in a Rose Garden ceremony with Lauren, Marcus, and Todd standing behind him. The Homeowner Protection Act of 2030. Federal law. Diane Winters' legacy. Not the empire she built, but the reform she inadvertently sparked. Tyranny defeated. Justice codified. Change made permanent. Lauren went into labor that night, as if hope had been waiting for the bill to pass before making her entrance. Marcus drove through D.C. traffic to the hospital, with one hand on the wheel and one hand holding Lauren's. She breathed through contractions. Focused. Calm. She had faced worse than childbirth. Hope Elizabeth Chen was born at 3 a.m, 6 pounds, 9 ounces. Dark hair. Lauren's determined chin. Marcus's serious eyes. She came into the world with less drama than her sister. Quieter. Watchful. Already studying her new environment with careful attention. When Grace met her baby sister for the first time, she reached out one small finger to touch Hope's tiny hand. I will protect you. Grace's voice was solemn. 4-year-old gravity. Like Mommy and Daddy protect us. Marcus felt something break open in his chest. This was why they had fought. Not for laws or headlines or national reform. For this, 2 daughters who would grow up knowing they were safe, who would learn that justice was possible, who would understand that ordinary people could do extraordinary things if they were willing to try. Year 6 brought an unexpected development. Diane Winters was eligible for a parole hearing. Good behavior. Genuine transformation documented by Dr. Martinez. The manuscript she had written being used in 12 states for HOA board training. Her lawyer advised against applying. Too soon. Unlikely to succeed. But Diane insisted. Not because she expected to be released. Because she needed to face her victims one more time. To apologize. To show them she had changed, even if they never forgave her. The parole hearing was scheduled for October. Lauren was notified. Victims had the right to attend, to speak, to oppose early release. Are you going? Marcus asked. They were in bed. Grace and Hope asleep down the hall. The house quiet except for the sound of their breathing. I do not know. Lauren stared at the ceiling. Part of me wants to see if she has really changed. Part of me never wants to see her again. You do not owe her anything. I know, but maybe I owe it to myself, to see the end of the story. She decided to attend, flew to Colorado, sat in the parole board hearing room with Patricia Morgan and Dr. Wilson. The 3 of them united one last time. Diane was brought in wearing prison khakis. No jewelry, no makeup, gray hair, lined face. She looked like what she was, a 57-year-old woman who had spent 6 years paying for her crimes. The board asked standard questions. Behavior in prison, rehabilitation efforts, plans if released. Diane answered honestly, quietly, no trace of the arrogant HOA president who had ruled Meadowbrook with an iron fist. Then came victim statements. Patricia spoke first. Diane destroyed my life when I was grieving. She took my home, my security, my peace. I have rebuilt, but I will never forget. Dr. Wilson spoke next. She blackmailed me, used my private pain as a weapon. The damage was profound. Then Lauren stood. She had prepared a statement, had written and rewritten it, but standing there, facing the woman who had violated her home and her body and her sense of safety, the prepared words felt inadequate. Diane Winters assaulted me in my own home. She ordered men to grab me, to hold me down, to destroy my property while 300 people watched and laughed. She gave me PTSD, nightmares, fear in my own home that took years to overcome. Diane's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. She did not look away, did not try to hide her shame. But Lauren's voice softened slightly. She also gave me purpose. Fighting her made me stronger. Her case changed laws, reformed systems, helped hundreds of families. Her destruction created something good. The room was silent. Do I forgive her? No. Will I ever? I do not know. She paused. But I will not oppose parole. She has served 6 years. She has 12 more. If the board believes she has changed and can serve society better outside than inside, I will not stand in the way. But I will not advocate for her either. That is not my job. Lauren sat down. The board deliberated for an hour, returned with their decision. Parole denied. While genuine remorse is evident, the severity of the crimes warrants the full sentence. We recommend review again in 5 years. Diane nodded. No surprise. No protest. I understand. Thank you. As she was led away, she looked back at Lauren, mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Lauren nodded once. A benediction. An ending. Outside the hearing room, Patricia took Lauren's hand. You are a better person than I am. I wanted her to stay in prison forever. So did I. Lauren's honesty was liberating, but holding on to that anger was exhausting. This way I can let go. She stays in prison. I stay free. They drove back to Meadowbrook together, 3 women bound by shared trauma and shared victory, the miles passing in comfortable silence, each processing the ending in her own way. When Grace turned 10, Marcus and Lauren decided it was time to tell her the full story. They sat her down on a Sunday afternoon. Hope was 5 now, playing in the yard. Old enough to be included, but too young to fully understand. We need to tell you something about our house, about what happened before you were born, they told her. Age-appropriate detail. The HOA president who abused power, the raid, the assault, the trial, the laws that changed because of it. Grace listened with serious eyes, asked questions, processed. Were you scared, Mommy? Terrified. Lauren's honesty was important, but I was also angry. And anger can be powerful if you use it right. Did the bad lady go to jail? Yes, for a long time. Good. Grace's sense of justice was absolute. People who hurt people should have consequences. That is right. Marcus pulled her close. And people who stand up to bullies should be celebrated. That is why we are telling you, so you know. Standing up is hard, but it is always worth it. Grace absorbed this, nodded. I will remember. And she did. It became part of her identity. The girl whose parents changed the law, who stood up to a tyrant and won. She told the story at school for show and tell, brought in Lauren's books, became, in her own small way, an advocate for justice. Hope grew up hearing the story too, secondhand, filtered through Grace's retelling. She absorbed it differently, quieter, but no less profound. Both girls understood they came from courage, that their family had faced darkness and chosen light. That was their legacy. Year 11 arrived with news that surprised no one who understood the parole system. Diane Winters was being released. Early release for exemplary behavior. 11 years served. 7 years off for genuine rehabilitation, and significant contributions to prisoner education programs. She was 63 now, gray-haired, weathered, a different person than the woman who had entered. She moved to a small town 2 hours from Meadowbrook, changed her name legally, got a job at a library, lived quietly, anonymously. She occasionally spoke at HOA board training sessions, always identified only as former inmate 847362. Her story served as warning, her transformation as proof that change was possible even for the worst offenders. She never contacted Lauren, never tried to return to Meadowbrook, understood that some doors once closed should stay closed. She had been given a second chance. She would not squander it. Patricia Morgan died 4 years later at age 82, peaceful, in her sleep, surrounded by family in the condo she had bought with restitution money from Diane's sentence. Her funeral was packed, 300 people, Meadowbrook residents, HOA reform advocates, lawyers who had used her meticulous documentation to win cases. Lauren gave the eulogy, spoke about strength and courage and the way one elderly widow's refusal to be silenced had helped change a nation. Patricia kept records for 3 years while Diane terrorized her. Those records became evidence. That evidence became conviction. That conviction became precedent. One woman's careful documentation rippling outward in ways she never imagined. Grace and Hope sat in the front row, 15 and 10, learning about legacy, about how ordinary people doing ordinary things, keeping records telling truth, refusing to be intimidated, could change the world. Todd Ellis came to the funeral, stood in the back, did not approach the family, but he was there, still trying, still serving. His foundation had helped over 2,000 families now, testified in 60 cases, 43 convictions. His redemption was not complete, would never be complete, but it was real. After the service, Lauren found him in the parking lot. "Patricia forgave you, you know, near the end," she told me. Todd's eyes filled with tears. "I did not deserve it." Number. Lauren's agreement was gentle, but she gave it anyway. That was who she was. Kind, even when kindness was not deserved. "I am going to keep doing the work." Todd's voice was thick. "For the rest of my life. It is all I can do." "It is enough." Lauren surprised herself by meaning it. "You cannot undo the harm, but you are preventing future harm. That matters." They shook hands. A peace deeper than the one they had made years ago. An understanding that redemption was not about deserving, it was about choosing, every day, to be better. 20 years after Diane Winters was arrested, Meadowbrook Estates held a memorial dedication, a plaque installed at the community center, not celebrating her downfall, commemorating what had been built in her absence, in memory of those who stood up to tyranny. May this community always choose freedom, fairness, and compassion over fear. August 2025. The day Meadowbrook took back its soul. Grace Chen, now 25, spoke at the ceremony. A lawyer herself, public defender, following in her mother's footsteps. She talked about growing up in Meadowbrook, learning the story of what her parents had done, understanding from a young age that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. "My parents were victims, but they refused to stay victims. They fought back, they changed laws, they helped hundreds of families. And they taught me and my sister that justice is not given. It is taken, by people who care enough to fight for it." Hope stood beside her sister, 20 years old, studying political science, planning to run for state legislature, the next generation, carrying forward the legacy. Marcus and Lauren sat in the front row, 62 and 60, gray-haired, lined faces, hands clasped together, watching their daughter speak about courage and justice and the responsibility to stand up to bullies, feeling the circle close, the story complete. Marcus had retired from the FBI 2 years earlier. 30 years of service, commendations, successful cases, a legacy of protecting the innocent and pursuing the guilty. The HOA abuse task force he created was now permanent, trained agents across the country, prevented future Dianes. His retirement party had been held at the same community center. 400 people, colleagues, neighbors, victims he had helped, both daughters speaking about their father, the man who had taught them that justice mattered, that standing up to bullies was always the right choice, that protecting the vulnerable was the highest calling. That evening, the Chen family gathered on the porch of the house where it had all started. Marcus and Lauren, Grace and Hope, the next generation's partners, grandchildren, a 7-year-old boy named Marcus after his grandfather, a 5-year-old girl who looked exactly like Grace had at that age. The sun set over Meadowbrook Estates, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, the neighborhood quiet, peaceful, free. Children played on sidewalks without fear. Neighbors chatted on porches. The ordinary beauty of community built on mutual respect. "Tell us the story, Grandpa." Little Marcus climbed into the old man's lap. Marcus looked at Lauren, the question in his eyes. She nodded. "Always tell the story. Never let them forget what freedom costs." Once upon a time, in this very neighborhood, there was a woman who thought she was a queen. She made up rules. She hurt people who disagreed with her. She thought she was untouchable. What happened to her? Little Marcus's eyes were wide. "Your grandmother and I showed her she was wrong. We fought back. We won. And we made sure it could never happen again." "'Cause you were brave?" "Because we chose to be." That is the secret. Bravery is not something you are born with. It is something you choose, every day. When it is hard, when it is scary, when it would be easier to stay quiet. "I want to be brave like you." Marcus held his grandson close. "Then stand up to bullies. Protect people who cannot protect themselves. Tell the truth even when it is hard. That is how you are brave." The family sat together as darkness fell, multiple generations, bound by blood and shared history and the understanding that they came from people who had faced tyranny and refused to break. That was their inheritance. Not money, not property. Courage. The legacy that mattered. Somewhere in a small-town library, an elderly woman shelved books and helped patrons and lived quietly under an assumed name. Diane Winters was 70 now, 9 years past her release, nearly 2 decades past her reign as HOA president. She thought about Meadowbrook sometimes, the kingdom she had lost, the destruction she had caused, the people she had hurt. She had never sought forgiveness, knew she did not deserve it, but she had spent 9 years in freedom trying to prevent others from making her mistakes, speaking at training sessions, sharing her story, warning anyone who would listen about the seduction of power and the corruption of unchecked authority. It was not redemption, but it was something. A small light in the darkness she had created, the only offering available to someone who had been a tyrant and learned too late what that cost. She would die unknown, unremarked, unmourned, except perhaps by the librarians who knew her as a quiet colleague who shelved books with meticulous care. That was her penance. Anonymity. The opposite of the recognition she had craved as HOA president. But her story would live on. In Lauren's books, in training materials, in the federal law that bore no name but existed because of her crimes, in every HOA board that governed justly because they had been warned what happened when governance became tyranny. That was her real legacy. Not the empire she built, the destruction that sparked reform. Marcus and Lauren Chen grew old together in the house where they had been victimized and where they had chosen to stay and fight. They watched their daughters become leaders, their grandchildren learn the stories, their community thrive. They had started as ordinary people living ordinary lives. They had been pushed to the edge by a tyrant with a clipboard and a god complex. They had chosen to push back. And in pushing back, they had changed not just their own lives, but the lives of thousands they would never meet. That was the real story. Not about HOA rules or property values or neighborhood governance. About people. Ordinary people who found extraordinary courage when they needed it. Who refused to accept injustice. Who stood up when standing up was dangerous. Who proved that the system could work if people were willing to fight for it. The price of power was everything. Diane Winters had paid it. The price of justice was courage and patience, and the willingness to fight even when the odds seemed impossible. Marcus and Lauren had paid it, but the reward was this: a quiet evening on a porch, family gathered, children safe, a community at peace, not because someone with authority had decreed it, but because people had chosen it, had fought for it, had built it together. And in the end, that was the only story that mattered. Not the villain's fall, but the hero's triumph. Not the darkness, but the light. Not tyranny, but freedom. The sun set completely. Stars appeared overhead. The Chen family went inside. The porch light stayed on. A beacon, a reminder. A promise that in this house, in this community, in this country, ordinary people could still stand up to bullies and win, if they were willing to try.